Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the fox of Crystal Cove and got a harem? Part 1. Huge shout out to Moretsuna Sora for this story. If you want more awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Naruto frowned at the recurring sight in front of him. He knew it was a dream since he had seen this same scene for nearly the last year or so. It was an old, almost broken shrine as pieces of it looked like they were about to cave in on itself. It was bound in a red rope that looped around it so many times, sealing off the shrine from being open but still allowing him to see into it, through the wooden screens. His body tensed again, like always, as he felt the same oppressive force push down onto him, while a single massive red eye opened up behind the screen. The eye nearly took up all of the insides of the shrine, the slitted pupil widening in the dark before a pearly white fanged teeth smiled at him. "Soon, boy, very soon we will meet again," the dark voice whispered out, fear almost gripping his chest before it all went away in a flash as he bolted up from his bed. He panted out breathlessly, as he always hated how he was awoken so abruptly from the nightmare. "Ugh, same freaking thing every night, but at least it doesn't wake me up too early," he thought as the alarm just started to chime before he silenced it and got off his bed. His name was Naruto Uzumaki, a 17-year-old that lived in the haunted city of Crystal Cove. He was an orphan who lost his parents around when he was 5, but besides that, his dark red hair and whiskers on his cheeks, he was moderately normal. Another day, and most likely another stupid person deciding to dress up as a monster, he thought with a sigh, as people trying out insane plots to either rob the town of something or drive everyone out of it. It was an odd mix of interesting and annoying. Especially since the adults and authority figures of the town always fell for them being real and wanted to profit off of it. The only people who didn't get swept along with the stupid masked monsters happened to be the group of people he called friends. Together they formed a group that were always at the center of everything and were the ones that solved them. The group consisted of Fred, the son of the mayor, Daphne, the daughter of Crystal Cove's most successful family, Shaggy, and Scooby, a man and a dog that literally had a bottomless stomach, and then there was Velma. Velma was his closest friend, ever since his parents disappeared. She was also the girl he has had a crush on for nearly as long as he has known her. To him, Velma was utterly amazing. She was the smartest person he knew, but never bragged about it or looked down on others like him, since he was about average when it came to intelligence. Her figure was also incredibly beautiful, even if she didn't see it herself. She was even so spontaneous at times, trusting her gut as much as she did her brain. Overall, to him, she was the whole package. To him, the only downside was that she never noticed his feelings, though it didn't keep him from being her closest friend. He sighed, a bit saddened, as he brought up old wounds before he heard a car honk from outside the medium-sized apartment he rented. Smiling, he stuck his head out of the window to see his friends waiting for him in their van. "I'll be right out," he called before going back in his apartment and closing the window. Going quickly, he threw on his usual outfit, which consisted of a long-sleeved black shirt and an orange jacket vest that had a black fur-lined hood. His pants were dark blue jeans, while he wore black sandals, as wearing closed-toed shoes always felt off with him. He quickly left his apartment and smiled as his friends waved at him. "Morning, Naruto, how'd you sleep? Same nightmare as usual?" a familiar voice asked as he turned and smiled, trying not to blush as he looked at the source of it. He swore every time he saw Velma she got more and more beautiful in his eyes. She was about a head shorter than him, with a cute rounder face and short chin-length auburn hair that had 2 red bows in it. Her eyes were a light green behind her glasses that brought out her light freckles. Her figure was utterly amazing, not a twig like other girls, but she had a curvy figure with weight in all the right places, like her thighs and ass that she carried well, a rather massive J-cup chest, *1, and a very plump rear. Her trademark orange turtleneck sweater helped seriously hide her large chest alongside the heavy-duty bras he knew she wore due to his time sharing a house with her for a bit growing up. He had only really seen her figure unrestrained once when she wore a swimsuit, but it was just a bit before her figure blossomed to how it is now. From his time together with her, due to them knowing each other for so long, he came to love her quick wit that made her able to trade facts and insults on the fly. Also, due to his closeness with her, he was the only one to know of Velma's slight, wild side. She always wanted to be noticed and listened to due to her tourist attraction and slight money-obsessed parents never fully paying attention to her, something he was happy to pick up slack for. Yeah, same nightmare. I just wish it would stop or something for once. It's really getting annoying, he said as he ran his hand through his spiky red hair that poked out in every direction, his blue eyes looking down at Velma as she frowned up at him. She was the only one he trusted well enough to tell her about the nightmare. She had tried suggesting numerous remedies, but none of them helped. I'm sure they will stop soon. I'll look up some more remedies after school, she said as he smiled and hugged her, resting his head on top of her head, something he knew she found embarrassing. Thanks, Velma. Always so sweet, he said with a chuckle as she rolled her eyes with a smile and hugged him back. He always loved having her in his arms as it made him feel like for a brief moment they were actually together, and unbeknownst to him, Velma also liked being in his arms. Something about it made her feel like she was safe. The hug, like normally, lasted for a time that others might consider awkward, but their friends had grown to accept it after learning of his parentless situation and the fact Velma was the person he had been closest to since he was young. Come on, guys. We need to get to school, Fred said as he honked the horn slightly, making Naruto sigh and let go of Velma. You get in the front, I'm going to stick in the back, Velma said as he frowned but nodded. While she walked away, he couldn't help but stare at her luscious thighs and plump ass, which was barely hidden by her red skirt, which, with the way she walked at times and the way her skirt was short, allowed him to see brief flashes off her butt and panties. He knew it was slightly perverted to stare, but with how things were with her not catching on to his feelings for a couple years, looking was all he had, sadly. Sorry, Naruto. I tried to get you and Velma some more time, Daphne said with a frown as she was the only person that really knew of his feelings towards Velma, something she deduced on her own and, with his somewhat terrible poker face when it came to it, he confirmed it to her. Since then she was his ally, as she was somewhat in the same unrequited love situation between her and Fred. Thanks, Daphne, but it's fine. Not like I won't possibly get other chances, he said with a slight chuckle as Daphne nodded with a smile as she scooted over, allowing him to sit next to the window while Scooby, the talking dog of the group, to lay on the floor while he ate a sandwich. Morning, Naruto, Scooby said with a smile. Morning, Scoobs, he said with a chuckle as he pet the dog before closing the door and letting Fred pull off onto the road. He couldn't help but sigh as he saw Velma talk with Shaggy in the back of the van. He wasn't petty or shallow, but he honestly didn't see what Velma saw in Shaggy. Shaggy was a nice guy and a good friend when it came down to it, but it always seemed he was more interested in his dog Scooby than anything else. The main thing that really annoyed and borderline pissed him off was how he seemed almost scared and grossed out whenever Velma tried to show him affection. It honestly made him question the boy's sexuality a bit. He tried not to grind his teeth as he saw Velma try and show Shaggy affection. Grinding his teeth was a bad habit he picked up from biting his tongue and keeping his comments to himself whenever he got somewhat jealous of Shaggy. Hey Scooby, how about you come sit up on the seat? I'm hopping in the back, he said as Daphne patted him on the back before he hopped over the seat and sat next to an upset Velma who was glaring at Shaggy. Sorry, it was a bit stuffy up there with 4 people, so I thought I'd join you back here, he said with a smile as he put his arm around her shoulder and pulled her into his side. His smile grew slightly as Velma leaned against him and rested her head on his chest. Naruto tried not to roll his eyes as best he could as Shaggy mouthed thank you to him. He ignored the teen as he started to stroke Velma's shoulder and arm, as while they were in a position that most people would picture couples in, this was merely how they always were. Velma felt happy as her frown from being upset at Shaggy not accepting her affection slowly disappeared completely into a smile as the comforting touch of Naruto, as always, cheered her up. Her smile grew as she scooted closer, resting more against Naruto as he continued to caress her. Before he could enjoy Velma being in his arms anymore, they were jostled forward as Fred slammed on the brakes just as a manhole cover shot up into the air a few feet in front of the mystery machine. He frowned as green smoke gathered around them just as the manhole cover embedded itself into the street a couple feet from them, and a noise that sounded like a mix between a growl and a gurgle sounded out from in the smoke. "Quick, roll up the window," Naruto said as he saw some shadow coming closer to the open window before Daphne leapt over and quickly rolled up the window just as a glowing green hand slammed onto the window. He watched from the back seat as the monster's arms stretched out, rocking the van before he held onto Velma, cushioning her as they are slammed against one side to the other. He had a slight blush on his cheeks as due to the shaking he was currently holding onto some of the exposed parts of Velma's thighs. He couldn't help but take a bit of an advantage of the situation as he gently rubbed his hands up and down her thighs a bit as best as he could with the rocking. Velma, not that he could see, also had a blush on her cheeks from the physical contact but decided to keep her mouth shut, figuring it was all because of whatever was attacking the van. Zoinks! Like, what was that? Shaggy asked out as Naruto tried not to blush from the fact that because of how the van was shaken up, Velma's chest was now against his face. "It looks like a mystery to me, and I think that's a little more important than school to me," Fred said as he quickly got out of the van and ran after where the shadow had lumbered off to. "Come on, guys," Daphne said as Velma quickly got up, shaking off her blush as she grabbed Naruto's wrist and pulled him up before they all ran after Fred. He frowned a bit as one by one they all went down into the sewer, turning on their flashlights so they could see. "Well, I doubt our sewers are supposed to have holes in them like this," Naruto said as he flashed his light towards the hole in the wall that led to what looked like one of the Crystal Cove's caves. "Guys, look over there," Velma said as she flashed her light towards a stack of metal drums, all bearing a radioactive symbol with glowing green goo seeping out of them. "They look like military-style barrels. By the oxidation, I'd say probably 30 or 40 years old," she added as Naruto moved her back before she could step into any of the green waste. "Be careful then. I doubt stepping in something radioactive is good for your health," he said with a chuckle as Daphne wandered off. "Fred, I think I found something," Daphne said as they looked over to see her holding a golden locket that played a light tune when opened. "Nice work, Daphne. It could be a clue," Fred said as Daphne blushed softly and smiled. "Thanks, Fred, you're so sweet," she said before she looked up to already see Fred walking away. "Oh, we can talk later then," she added with a sigh before Naruto patted her on the back, a gesture they often gave to one another when their interests somewhat shut them down. Naruto frowned as he crouched down and picked up a hard hat, wondering where it came from before they all heard a dripping sound. He was the first to start looking up before he sighed. "Well, this just got a bit weirder, and I think it's time to call the cops," Naruto said as they all saw 3 cocooned workers stuck to the ceiling of the caves. The cops, being that they were nearby City Hall, came rather fast before escorting them out of the caves while removing the bodies from the ceiling. "Alright, do you kids see what happens when you stick your noses where they don't belong? People get cocooned." Sheriff Stone, the sheriff of Crystal Cove and their least biggest fan, said as Naruto rolled his eyes. "Well, first we found him like that, and how is this remotely our fault?" he asked with a sigh before the sheriff glared at him. He and the sheriff never got along, more so than the others. He didn't know if it was because of his lack of parents, or the fact that the sheriff had tried before to set him straight, but they often butted heads a lot. "Yeah, and there was a monster," Daphne said before the sheriff interrupted her. "Okay, from this point forward this is a crime scene and a future tourist attraction. Stay out of it," he said as Velma clenched her fist and shook it at the back of the retreating sheriff. "I've gotta stay out of it right here," she said with a growl as he smiled, resting his head on top of hers as he put his hands on her shoulders to calm her down. "Calm down, Velma, I doubt the mayor would be happy that his sheriff got beaten down by you," he said with a chuckle as Velma pouted slightly from him, resting his head on hers but made no attempt to push him away. "Let me talk to him," Fred said with a smile as he walked towards the cop cars and ambulance. "Don't worry, Fred will make him understand," Daphne said in a dreamy tone, watching Fred walk away before they widened their eyes in slight shock when Fred started to run back towards them with one of the cocoon bodies over his shoulder. "Shaggy, start the car," Fred said as Naruto almost fell over laughing while he went to open up the back of the mystery machine. "I thought like you said you were going to talk to him?" Shaggy asked as Fred shrugged his shoulders, still running towards the van. "He wasn't in a listening mood," Fred said in a hurried tone. "So you steal a dead body?" Rockin' Velma said as she stood next to Naruto before Fred tossed the body in the van. "Well, I guess I can cross stealing a body off my bucket list," Naruto said with a chuckle as everyone, besides Velma, looked at him strangely. "What?" "We can at Bernie's," he said, explaining it as they all nodded, understanding that he didn't have anything creepy behind it. "Come on guys, I know just who can help us," Freddy said as Shaggy and him got in the front seat, leaving Naruto, the two girls and Scooby in the back with the body. "Well, let's hurry. Having a dried-up dead body this close to me is a bit disturbing," Velma said as she scooted closer to Naruto, trying to move out of the body's line of sight. Shaggy, being the one driving, quickly drove them to their high school before he and Fred started to carry the body through the hallways of the school. "Are we seriously just going to barge in there? I'm pretty sure this will traumatize some people. On second thought, let's go in there. It sounds fun," Naruto said with a chuckle before Velma jokingly, not at all seriously, hit him on the back of the head. "We are in a hurry, so we have to go in now," Fred said as they quickly stormed into the biology classroom. "Professor Raffalo, we need your help," he said as the whole class ran out screaming, making Naruto chuckle as he knew that was going to happen. "Couldn't you kids have waited until break?" the professor said as Naruto shook his head. "And miss seeing everyone run off screaming?" "No way," he said as Velma smirked at him and rolled her eyes. She was used to his pranking nature and how he liked messing with people at times. She also knew he used to be worse when it came to it, as in the past he used to terrorize the kids in the elementary school with paint bombs and the like. It wasn't until he accidentally splashed her in paint did he tone it down and keep it under wraps. Nowadays he only used his skills when he needed them, to either help with Fred's traps or just mess with whatever costumes monster that was terrorizing the town. While he might not be the smartest kid in school, he was very smart when it came to making controlled explosions and pyrotechnics. He still always kept a smoke bomb on him in case they needed to make an escape. "Fine, just set the cocoon on my table," the professor said as Shaggy and Fred quickly went over to set it down, allowing the professor to check it over with a stethoscope. "Is he like dead?" Shaggy asked with a shiver as Professor Raffalo shook his head. "No. He's alive and seems to be in some kind of dehydrated stasis," the professor said as Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "Well, good for the guy but bad for my list," Naruto said with a chuckle as the professor continued to look the cocoon body over. "I have no idea how this came to be, but I'm guessing it's temporary," Raffalo said as he took off his stethoscope. "Do you have any idea what could have done this?" Daphne asked as the professor rubbed his chin. "I'm not sure, I'll have to do further tests," he said as Velma rose her hand up to get his attention. "Couldn't you scrape the cocoon off him a bit, and study that so we can get the body to the hospital since he is still alive?" Velma said before Fred covered her mouth with a nervous smile as he awkwardly laughed. "You do your tests, Professor, and we'll get out of your hair," Fred said, still awkwardly laughing as he started to gather them up and move them towards the door. "I'm sure he will get the medical treatment he needs when he gets out of the cocoon, Velma. For now we should worry about the monster that is cocooning the people so no one else gets in the same situation," Naruto said as Velma nodded before they got back into the van. "Let's go get some food and figure out our plan to find the monster," Fred said as Shaggy and Scooby smiled at the mention of food. "Oh, let's go to Fredmir's," Shaggy said as Fred nodded and got behind the wheel. "Ugh, that stuff is so weird," Naruto said with a shiver as that green food had such an odd consistency, and wasn't yogurt or ice cream. He didn't like eating something that no one knew what it was. He conceded though as he, Velma, and Shaggy got back in the back with Velma sitting down next to him again as the van pulled out of the school parking lot towards Fredmir's. The ride there was a bit silent, most likely due to Fred already thinking up possible traps for him to use to catch whatever monster there was. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo focused on eating, and Velma just relaxing against his shoulder. "Come on guys, let's, get in line before it gets even longer," Shaggy said as they waited in line while Naruto slightly had to hide a bit behind the others to avoid the one thing that honestly scared him. Clowns. He didn't know what it was about clowns that scared him, but it was the one thing he can't handle. Bring him face to face with any other monster, and he'd be fine and ready to take them down, but clowns honestly terrified him. "Oh Naruto, I'm so sorry, I forgot that the owner of Fruitmares is a clown," Velma said with a frown as she comfortingly held her friend's hand to try and calm him down. "It's fine. I know how much Shaggy and Scooby like it, so I wasn't going to make you all go somewhere else just because of my random fear. Plus I'm fine as long as it stays away from me," he said as he gave Velma's hand a squeeze as the line quickly moved along. "Come on guys, let's get the Fruitmare and leave. Naruto's having trouble with the whole clown thing," Daphne said as she was the next to remember her friend's fear. Fred nodded as he paid for a cone for each of them and ate for Shaggy and Scooby as they made their way towards the door. "I still don't know what this stuff is," Fred said with a slight frown as he bit into his. "That's the point, it's supposed to be a secret," Shaggy said as he held a box that had all 8 of his and Scooby's cones sitting in it before they started to eat, if you could call it that. At times Naruto wondered if they actually ate sometimes, since they often made more of a mess, sending food flying everywhere, and their mouths covered in food. Scooby he could understand eating like that since he is a dog, but Shaggy was a teenage boy. "You know what, I'm not hungry anymore, you can have mine," Scooby, Naruto said as he tossed his cone towards the dog, who jumped up and caught it in his mouth. "Now can we please get out of here? I really don't like it here," he said before a pair of green-gloved hands grabbed his shoulders. "Ah, come on, it's always fun at Fruitmares. How about a shrimp boat made out of circus balloons?" Fruitmare said as Velma and the others widened their eyes, a bit worried what Naruto would do since when he was afraid Naruto either punched or ran. Thankfully for them, he silently bolted from the store so fast it made a bit of a gust. "I'm sorry, Mr. Fruitmare, he just has a bad fear of clowns. Nothing personal," Velma said as she quickly followed after her friend with the others following behind her. Thankfully Naruto stopped running as he was holding onto a railing for support. "I hate clowns," he growled out with a shiver as he shook it off. "Are you okay?" Velma asked as she hugged him from behind, rubbing his back to calm him down. She didn't mind comforting her best friend, but it always made her blush a bit whenever she felt his toned and defined muscles against her, like whenever they hugged or leaned against one another. He too had to hold back his blush as he felt Velma's body press against his back. Her breasts, even under her sweater, pressing up against him made things difficult. "You always are the one who calms me down so easily. Thanks, Velma," he said with a soft smile as he started to run his hands over her arms that were wrapped around his chest. Though with how her face was basically buried in his back, no one noticed the light blush on her face due to the sincere comment from her friend, making her happy she was still able to calm him down like this even after so many years. "How come no one comforts me and Scoobs when we get scared?" Shaggy asked as Daphne, who was smiling at the cute moment that to everyone else looked like friend helping another friend, but to Daphne she could see the undertones of it. "That's because you are always scared, Shaggy, and if we did that every time we'd be glued to you," Daphne said as they opened their mouths to retort but frowned and shut their mouths as they knew it was true. "Come on guys, we need to talk about the monster and how if the cocoon is organic it would be the first honest-to-goodness monster in Crystal Cove," Fred said as Daphne sighed. As much as she loved Fred, he had little or no tact when it came to stuff like that, as well as timing. Velma sighed as she pulled away from Naruto, fixing her glasses. "My guess is that the cocoon is a multicelled mutation, probably a result of radiated allotropes and free radical implosions," she said as she walked over towards Shaggy. "What do you think, Shaggy?" she asked as she tried to hold his hand. Naruto's hands clenched around the railing as he saw Shaggy freak out and run away from Velma like she was a monster, claiming he wanted more Fruitmares. "You know, that is interesting, but if it is radiation, like those drums we found underground, wouldn't there be readings of radioactivity around town, and the bodies of the people cocooned would be getting radiated as well, he said as he turned around, facing them and leaning back against the railing. So it makes me wonder, is it made of something else, or what, he added with a frown as something felt off about it. We'll have to see what Professor Raffalo finds out tomorrow. I'll see you guys tomorrow, Fred said as he and Daphne walked off towards the van. Well, at least someone listened to me, Velma grumbled as Naruto slung his arm over her shoulder with a chuckle. I might not understand most of it, but I listened, Naruto said with a chuckle as they started to walk home, both of which were rather close by to one another. He frowned a bit as he noticed Shaggy returning and pulled his arm off of her, knowing already that she most likely wanted some space to talk with him. I'll catch up in a bit. I think I forgot my phone in the mystery machine, so I got to check before Fred drives off, he said as Velma nodded, and he jogged over to the van before sighing and leaning against it. I'm sorry, Naruto, that Fred keeps interrupting yours and Velma's moments. I'm trying to teach him the concept of a moment, Daphne said as she rolled down the window. It's whatever, seems like Fred did that same to you a while ago. We are both fighting an uphill battle, he said as he noticed the defeated look on Daphne's face. Well, at least yours actually notices things from time to time, unlike mine, who, as much as I love him, is so dense. Getting him to look away from his traps and focus on me is like trying to get Scooby to spend a romantic evening with a cat, she said with a sigh as Naruto patted her head, making her giggle and smile a bit. I know it will be hard, but it's not like either one of us is going to just quit, since I doubt feelings work like that, he said with a chuckle as she nodded. Thanks, Naruto, she said as they watched Shaggy and Velma talk a bit in the distance, though with Naruto's above perfect hearing he could somewhat listen to them even from across the street. He was incredibly thankful for his insane patience, since if not for that he would have snapped at Shaggy long ago for how he constantly keeps pushing her off for Scooby-Doo, not listening to her or even doing anything with her, as he was afraid of his dog getting upset. Not to be rude to Shaggy, but he really is an idiot for being more worried about a dog than Velma, he said with a sigh as Daphne nodded as they watched Shaggy run off after Velma tried to kiss him, and he ran his hand through his hair. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to catch up to Velma and try and cheer her up, he said as Daphne smiled. Good luck, she yelled as he jogged after Velma to catch up with her. Hey, sorry about that, I actually did leave my phone in the van, he said with a smile as he draped his arm over her shoulder again. So there's this science fiction movie marathon on tonight, and was wondering if you wanted to watch it with me? He asked her, chuckling as she looked at him with a raised eyebrow. Why do you want to watch that? We both know you don't understand much of those kinds of movies, she said as he rubbed the back of his head with a smirk. Well, I know you love those kinds of movies, and we always watch them when they come on. Plus you look a bit upset about something, so I thought what better way to cheer you up, he said as he gave her shoulder a soft squeeze. Velma couldn't hold back her smile as it broke through her frown. Fine, I guess that sounds fun. Plus I haven't been over in a while and I want to make sure you aren't making a mess of your room again. And you better have kept those chocolates that I like in stock, Velma said while playfully poking him in the chest as he smiled and nodded. I have been keeping the place nice and clean, Velma, since I really don't want your parents to get upset about it, since it is technically their place that I'm renting. As for the chocolate, I always keep some in my cupboard in case you randomly drop by, since you have a key, he said with a smirk, as her knew how addicted Velma was to chocolate, and was fine with buying them for her. Well then, what's keeping us? I'll call my mom when we get there, Velma said with a smile as she was happy to get some alone time with Naruto, her closest friend, since with all the mysteries and monsters that have been coming into town for the last few months they had been very busy. Both of them couldn't help but smile as they walked towards his apartment, his arms still draped over his shoulder, as she moved closer to him, always enjoying when he was close. He always made her feel safe, especially given how many times he had saved her and the others from the monsters and fought the monsters to give them time to escape or capture it. He was the bravest person in the group, even with his debilitating fear of clowns. Velma must have been too caught up in her thoughts as they had arrived at his apartment before she even noticed. Well? Come on in, Velma. It's not like this isn't a second home to you or anything, he teased as he gave her a squeeze on her shoulder while he opened the door for her. She blushed a bit out of embarrassment for not paying attention for the walk over while she let herself into the apartment. It was a modest one-bedroom, one-bath apartment that had a decent-sized kitchen and even a little living room, and even came equipped with a washing and drying machine. It was a place her parents leased out to him after he turned 16, and they decided he should get his own place and move out of their basement. He paid for the rent by working for them at her family's gift and tour shop. She smiled as she saw the usual pictures of the group around his apartment, as his friends were basically everything he had. No one else in the group knew that he was an orphan and had been missing his parents since he was 5, a fact that was covered up by her whenever they were arrested for saving the town. She would lie and say they were always out of town. Thankfully, no one ever questioned it, and figured he was staying with her until they came back from their trip across seas. Her smile grew slightly as she noticed a few photos of just the two of them. They ranged from them as little kids to more recent. She was a bit happy that he had pictures of just the two of them, since it meant they really were still close, even with the whole thing where Shaggy and she had started dating. He was the only one she told, since she never wanted to hide anything from him, and he was always so supportive of her. "Velma? You still there?" Naruto teased as she looked up to see him smiling at her with a bar of chocolate and 2 coffee cups full of tea in his hands. She also noticed how he had changed out of his usual clothes and into a pair of black pajama pants and an orange sleeveless shirt that had a red spiral painted on the front of it. "Did you get changed, make tea, and grab my chocolate in the time I was looking around?" she asked as he chuckled and nodded while she took her tea and chocolate. "Yeah, you've been out of it since Footmir's. Are you feeling okay?" he asked as he pressed the back of his hand against her forehead. "Yes, I'm fine," she said as she gently pushed his hand away. "I've just had a somewhat bad day. Are my pajamas and clothes still where I left them? 'Cause I really need to get out of this sweater," she said, as while it was chilly outside, it was rather warm in his apartment. "Yeah, they are still where you left them. The only clothes of yours I touch here are the dirty ones you put in the basket," he said as Velma nodded with a smile and quickly ran into his room, taking them from his dresser and slid into the bathroom. "I'll get the TV turned on and ready so we can go straight to watching when you get out. I might order a pizza, the same as always, right?" he asked through the closed door. "Yeah. That sounds great," she said, as since the pizza place was literally just down the street, she didn't doubt that it would be here in a few minutes. Velma hummed a little tune as she changed into her pajamas, which consisted of a dark red tank top and a pair of short, soft orange pajama shorts. Normally she would never wear these kinds of things in public, but around Naruto it was fine. She had known him since she was little, so she wasn't nearly as self-conscious around him. Naruto tried his hardest not to stare at Velma as she walked out of the bathroom just as the pizza was delivered, being that he normally ordered one around this time, but failed as now that she was out of her baggy clothes he could see all of her figure. He was able to see just how plump her butt was, how soft her thighs looked, and just how sizable her breasts were, something that was extremely hidden under her baggy sweater. Velma blushed a bit as she noticed him staring at her, her pride as a woman going up a bit as she felt proud that her best friend still saw her as a girl and not just his friend only. "What are you looking so intently at?" she asked as she suddenly became very self-conscious from how intently he was looking. Naruto quickly snapped out of his daze and blushed softly as he tore his eyes away from Velma and her body. "Oh, nothing. I just haven't had you over here in a while, so I was just enjoying this bit of normalcy," he said with a chuckle, quickly turning his face to hide the blush. "Well, come on, the marathon is starting, so we wouldn't want to miss the beginning," he said as he picked up the pizza and smiled at her. "Sure, I'll just text my mom as a formality, since it's pretty much if I'm not home I'm over here, plus I'm pretty sure the horses are racing today, so she won't even notice me missing," Velma said with a smile as she walked over to the living room. Again he tried not to look, but Naruto couldn't help but watch her as she walked off into his living room, her rear jiggling a bit as she jumped onto his couch with a smirk. "Well, come on, Naruto, the movies are starting," Velma said as he nodded and walked over, taking his seat next to her. "Yeah, I'm here, turn it on," he said with a smile as he slung his arm over her shoulder, relaxing into the couch as the movie started. A few hours later, Velma woke up with a slight groan as she rubbed her eyes, blindly reaching for her glasses as the last thing she remembered was watching movies with Naruto on the couch, meaning she had fallen asleep on the couch. There they are, she thought while she grabbed her glasses, slipping them onto her face before a blush covered her cheeks as she saw just how close she was to Naruto. In Naruto's sleep, he seemed to have wrapped his arms around her, pressing her up against his chest and making her feel his defined muscles through their moderately thin pajamas. "Oh Naruto, you're really making this hard for me," Velma thought with a frown as she contemplated pulling away but couldn't bring herself to do it, and ended up wrapping her arms around him, pressing herself against him a bit more. She had long since given up the thought that someone like Naruto, who was easily one of the most popular and good-looking guys in school, would go after someone like her. She was a nerdy plump girl and he was a toned and athletic boy that was the exact opposite of her when it came to looks. She was happy with him just being her friend and giving her the occasional hug, as well as moments like these where they hung out at his apartment. "At least he's still my friend and is still here for me," she thought as she rested her head against his chest. "Velma," Naruto mumbled out as she slowly looked up, a bit afraid that he woke up just as she had started to basically cuddle him. The worry though went away as she saw that he was still asleep. It made her smile a bit more as he seemed to smile happily after saying her name. She jolted slightly in surprise as she felt his hand slide down her back, brushing up against the bare skin of her lower back as her shirt rode up a bit while she slept. Her blush grew even darker as he almost seemed to be petting her lower back, dangerously close to her but a bit. The near intimate contact made her surprised but at the same time made her feel comfortable. It made her wonder how this would feel to have all the time, and not just when one of them was asleep. She let out a content sigh as she laid her head against his chest and pulled herself closer to him, cuddling up against him as while she had given up the pipe dream of hers to be with Naruto, and started to try to fall for Shaggy. Instead, she wanted to enjoy what she could. "Good night, Naruto," she whispered with a smile as she took off her glasses, setting them on the table, before she drifted off back to sleep, entirely comfortable in the embrace of her closest friend and the man she knew she could never get. Next morning, Naruto was the first to wake up as the blaring sound of the alarm on his phone woke him up before he quickly hit the snooze button, but it was too late as he was already awake. As his eyes adjusted to the light, he couldn't help but smile as he saw Velma's hair messily sprawled against his chest, while she let out a grumble, as she seemed to be slowly waking up. He smiled a bit as he felt his hands on her lower back, on the bare skin as her shirt was pulled up a bit. He could have removed his hands, but with an opportunity like this he didn't feel like wasting it as he started to pet her lower back. "Why, good morning, Sleeping Beauty," he said with a chuckle as she dryly laughed into his chest, her face still buried in it. "Yeah, right. I so could pull off a cartoon princess," she said as she was still tired and adjusted herself to stay comfortable, wiggling a bit as she kept her hold on him and continued to use his chest as a pillow. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle as he smiled down at her. "Yeah, you're right. You're much better than any boring princess that would need saving. I say having a clever girl that can take care of herself is far more appealing," he said as he teasingly poked her lower back. Velma smirked as she looked up at him, even with her terrible eyesight, able to make out his face and smile as she poked his cheek. "Yeah, and don't you forget it," she said as she kept her finger against his cheek. A bit in a trance as they looked at one another, Velma smiled and used her index and middle fingers, slowly tracing his jawline, as Naruto found himself gently caressing her skin along the rim of her shorts. Neither one of them looked away from one another, their cheeks slowly heating up from the near intimacy of the moment, but before anything could or would happen, the alarm on his phone started to blare again, interrupting whatever was going on between the two of them. Velma was the first to sit upright as a blush grew darker on her cheeks. "I have to go change," she said quickly as she quickly felt around for her glasses before she ran off towards the bathroom, barely giving any time for Naruto to look at her. Naruto wasn't faring any better as he covered his face with his hands and let out a muffled groan. "This is torture," he yelled mentally as he turned off his cell phone alarm and resisted throwing it against the wall for ruining whatever that moment was. If things continue like this, I doubt I'll be able to just be the friend that helps her with her crappy relationship, he thought as he started his coffee machine, since he still remembered how Velma needed some to fully wake up. I don't want to be an asshole that steals a girl from someone else, but with Shaggy it seems like he doesn't even care about the relationship, he thought with a sigh as he sat down at his kitchen table. Before he shook his head, ran his hands through his hair. No. Velma honestly deserves someone who actually wants to be with her. I hate seeing her all depressed and sad whenever Shaggy runs away from her, and I care too much about her to continue seeing it happen, he thought as he clenched his fists. If I have to be a jerk and steal her away, then honestly, so be it, he added with a sigh as Velma walked out of the bathroom, still wearing her pajamas, which seeing her in them only steeled his resolve. She also wore a smile on her face that put him at ease, as he had slightly been worried he had freaked her out, or something, with that odd moment between the two of them. Oh, I'll pour your coffee for you. It should be brewed, he said as he walked over to the coffee maker and started to pour her a cup, adding the additions she liked in it. Thanks, Naruto. Coffee always helps me wake up a bit in the morning, she said as she accepted the cup before taking a small sip to test the temperature, letting out a content sigh. You always get it perfect. I've tried asking Shaggy to get me a cup at the little coffee place near school, but he never remembers it correctly even after telling him repeatedly for years, she said with a chuckle as Naruto smiled and poured himself a cup. Well, I just remember always having to make it for you back when I lived in your basement so you would get out of bed. You were always so lazy in the mornings back then. I remember how cute and awake you looked almost the second after drinking some coffee. You would always go back to reading whatever book you were into at the time before I had to drag you out of the house, he said as she smiled, hiding it behind the cup as she watched him smile at her, drinking his own coffee. Velma, for once, between last night and this morning, actually felt a very small bit of hope. Hope that maybe the pipe dream of being with Naruto wasn't so unobtainable. Though her insecurities still nibbled at the budding hope. I'm going to go change real quick and I'll pull out your clothes as well for you to change into after your coffee. Is that okay? He asked as she nodded with a smile. Halfway to his bedroom he stopped and turned around, looking at Velma with a bit of a nervous smile. Oh, I was wondering, since it always feels better to eat with someone rather than alone, do you want to come by for dinner? I'll walk you back home after it, he said as Velma looked up at him and smiled. That sounds great actually, she said as he smiled and turned back around to go get changed to allow her to get changed next before they spent their weekend, most likely with the others, since that is how most weekends ended up as. And true to the point, he was right. A few minutes after they both had gotten changed, she had gotten a call from Daphne telling him something had happened to Professor Raffalo, and that Fred had apparently taken it hard since he was the one that had gotten the professor involved. Apparently Fred was moping around at the local radio station, which was ran by another friend of theirs, Angel Dynamite. Of course, getting there when Fred owned the only transportation they had made it a bit difficult. Thankfully though, Velma's mom was able to help him and Velma get there. I was wondering when you all would get here. He's in the back, Angel said as Naruto was still impressed at her ability to pull off old 70s style clothing and not make it look ridiculous. They followed as Angel led them to the back room of the radio station's studio to see Fred asleep on the ground, hugging onto a record player before Daphne walked up to him, crouching down to his level. Fred? It's us, we're here for you, Daphne said as she hugged him on the ground and Scooby licked up his hair. It's no use, gang. I was the one who stole the body and Professor Raffalo paid the price. I should have listened to my dad and stayed out of anything to do with mysteries, Fred said as Velma stepped forward with a frown. We all helped steal the body, Fred, Velma said before Shaggy held up his hand. Well, I never actually touched Ao. Shaggy started to say before both he and Velma elbowed him. Fine, geez. We all took part, Freddy, he said as Velma rolled her eyes. Fred Jones, you've never turned away from a mystery in your life, Daphne said as Fred raised his head. But I've got nothing, Fred yelled as Velma put her hands on her hips and frowned down at Fred. Man up, Fred. We still got our first clue, the cocoon. I brought a sample, Scooby. What are you doing? She said before yelling at the dog in shock as he was eating away at the sample of cocoon she had set down on the table. What? It's fruit mirrors. Scooby said before he went back to sloppily eating it, making Velma shiver and Angel to frown. Check it out, if that dog mutates I'm putting it down, dig? She said as Shaggy walked past them. Wait, hold on. I think I get it, Shaggy said as he walked over, dipped his own finger into the bowl and tasted it, making everyone cringe and let out an ew. No, you guys, it's Fruitmare's. The cocoon is made out of the same stuff as Mr. Fruitmare's dessert, Shaggy said as they walked over to see if it was true. I'm still not eating that stuff after Scooby's been slobbering over it, he said just as everyone else tasted it. He's right, but if the cocoon is made out of Fruitmare's dessert, Daphne said as Shaggy interrupted her. Then if we capture the monster we can open up our own shop and have an endless supply of Fruitmare's dessert, Shaggy said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Or that means we don't have to worry about radiation and the monster is a clear hoax, as I doubt a real monster would be made out of a dessert, Naruto said as he leaned against the doorframe. Stop thinking with the bottomless pit you call a stomach, he added as Shaggy frowned slightly and Fred rubbed his chin. What do we know about Franklin Fruitamare? Fred asked as Naruto shivered. Besides that he is a clown? He asked as Velma patted him on the shoulder consolingly. I'll look it up, she said as she sat down behind Angel's computer and started researching. Apparently he showed up out of nowhere 2 months ago. Besides that we know nothing, Velma said as with her skills on a computer looking up one clown was easy enough. He is hiring right now for female servers, she said as Fred smiled. Then that's our, and Fred said as Shaggy nodded. If the girls can get jobs at Fruitmare's they can snoop around and find out more, Shaggy said as Fred smiled and nodded. That's a great idea, Shag, Fred said as he and the others got their plan together. Fruitmare's. Naruto struggled not to laugh to the point he was red in the face as he looked at Shaggy and Scooby in the female uniform, all with wigs and makeup on them. This isn't exactly what I had in mind. Why are me and Scooby dressed like girls when Daphne and Velma are girls? Shaggy asked as Scooby adjusted his skirt. Yeah, my skirt is too tight, Scooby said as Daphne and Velma smirked at them. Because Velma and I refused, Daphne said as Naruto smiled at Velma. I still think you would have looked great in it, Velma, he said as Velma scoffed, a soft blush on her face, and rolled her eyes. Yeah, right. Only in your dreams, Velma said as he shrugged his shoulders with a chuckle, as while Shaggy and Scooby were working at the shop until closing, he and the others would be getting the parts to Fred's next trap set up so they could put it together wherever they were planning on trapping the monster. The day went by rather quickly as before any of them really noticed it was already night, and Fruitmare's was closing up. Okay gang, now's our chance, Fred said as they watched Mr. Fruitmare leave the store and have Shaggy and Scooby lock up. Once they were at the doors, Shaggy quickly opened it and accepted his clothes from Daphne. Alright gang, fan out. See if you can find anything that ties Franklin Fruitmare to the slime mutant, Fred said as they all split up, though Naruto followed Velma as always since that was kind of how things went with splitting up, Fred and Daphne, Shaggy and Scooby, and then him and Velma. As they looked around they found nothing so far. Only drawers full of boxes of balloons and the freezers full of the Fruitmare dessert, which Shaggy and Scooby were devouring. Let's go check out the kitchen, Velma said as Naruto nodded and followed her before they heard Daphne calling for help as she pounded on a door. Daphne? Are you okay? He asked as he picked up a crowbar from nearby before Fred also came running over to help. Yeah. The door closed behind me suddenly, Daphne said as he and Fred forced open the door just as Shaggy and Scooby bolted into the room, but before they could crash into Daphne he quickly pulled her out of the way. He sighed as they crashed into the room before he looked in and didn't even see them. Did you two crash through the room? He asked before he noticed a hole in the floor at the back of the room. It was like a monster. Shaggy's voice yelled out from the hole before they all looked down to see that they had fallen down into one of the caves that ran under the city. We found something, Scooby added as he shrugged his shoulders and jumped down the hole. I think this is the same cave we were in the other day, Naruto said as he held out his arms to catch Velma while he looked away politely so he didn't see up her skirt. It must run through footmirrors as well, Velma said as Naruto set her down, allowing her to dust off and straighten her skirt, before he caught Daphne next. And check that out, Daphne said as she pointed towards another hole in the ceiling before Naruto set her down. It looks like someone has been digging, she said as she walked over, noticing a shovel standing up in a pile of rubble. Hold on a second, according to my GPS this is only 20 yards from footmirrors, which would put it directly under Crystal Cove's bank, she said as the others caught on. But like dude, why would a slime mutant burst a hole through footmirrors and then a bank? Shaggy said with a frown. Maybe he's hungry, Scooby said as Naruto smirked. For money, a rather human craving, wouldn't you say? He asked the others as Velma smirked. I smell a trap coming. I hope you're feeling up to leading a monster around, Naruto, Velma said as Naruto chuckled, already loosening up his muscles. Oh, I'm more than ready, he said with a smirk, always ready to bait a stupid person in a monster suit. Fred, being the expert at traps that he was, easily was able to set up the trap in a matter of a few minutes. The overcomplexity of it was a bit worrying, but Naruto's job was to lure the monster over and if it got out of the trap, capture it himself. He sighed slightly as he hated waiting for the monster appear, choosing to hide behind the barrels of what he hoped wasn't actual radioactive material before he heard the same growl from the day before. Well, you really aren't a looker, are you? He asked as he hopped up on top of the pyramid of barrels with a smirk before he immediately crouched down as it fired a blob of its material at him. Testy as well, I see. With a face like that I'd be angry too, he taunted as he back-flipped off the barrels to avoid its extended limb trying to grab him. He had to backflip a few more times, thankful that it was easy to read, before he turned around and started to run while it chased after him in a quick but limping pace. He continued to lead the monster along, dodging lobbed blobs of its goo and its claws before he reached the start of the Rube Goldberg-type trap that Fred had started. His eyes widened a bit as he felt himself slip, quickly looking down to see the monster had sent a carpet of slime towards him to trip him up, before it sent him sliding into the small lake in the cavern. Crap! Freaking monster! He's so lucky I have a waterproof case on my phone, he yelled mentally as he quickly swam back up only to sweat drop as he saw Fred, Daphne, Shaggy and Scooby all trapped in the cage as Velma was now running away from the monster. Naruto! Go help Velma! We'll get out of here soon! Fred yelled as he nodded, slicking his hair back as he quickly chased after the monster who had just jumped back up the hole leading to footmirrors. The second he got up there he could already see that Velma was in danger as the monster had bound her legs. Running through the kitchen he grabbed the extra long hose that connected to the dessert machine as he jumped up on the counter with a glare. Get away from her, you creep! Naruto yelled as he pushed off of the counter, using it as a springboard before he copied a move he had seen in an old kung fu movie, Return of the Green Beast, called the dynamic entry. It was basically a double-legged flying kick. Thankfully, though, it seemed to work and catch the monster off guard as his feet slammed into the monster's chest, sending him flying across the room and into the opposite wall before he came to a skidding stop next to Velma. The second he righted himself, he quickly aimed the hose at the monster and turned it on, blasting it with a torrent of frozen dessert that stuck it to the wall before tossing the hose down and looked towards Velma. Are you okay, Velma? He asked as he tore off the binding on her ankles before he brushed the hair away from her face, slightly stroking her cheek. Yeah, I'm fine, it didn't get me besides my legs, Velma said, a bit in awe at how heroically he had saved her, even going as far as to flying kick it in an act to protect her. A slight blush came to her cheeks as she felt his wet thumb, as he had recently taken a dip in the cavern's pond, softly stroke against her cheek before the others came back. What is going on here? Sheriff Stone yelled as he and Mayor Jones burst into the store, making Velma jump and scoot away in a mix of embarrassment and shock before she realized he meant the monster stuck to the wall. And why is the town's newest tourist attraction cocooned to the wall? Mayor Jones said as Fred held up his hands to calm his father down. Dad, Sheriff, hold on. You don't understand, That is not a monster, Fred said as Naruto helped Velma back up to her feet with a smile. Oh, hobbing steam clams, Freddy, then who is it? The mayor asked with a frown. Franklin Fruit Mayor, all but Naruto said as he wasn't quite sure who it was and the fear of if it was a clown behind the mask set in. He was trying to rob Crystal Cove Bank, Velma said as Sheriff Stone frowned. That's impossible because Franklin Fruit Mayor was the one who called us, he said as he stepped aside and Mr. Fruit Mayor walked in, causing Naruto to slightly freeze up. What? The gang all asked in confusion as Velma held onto Naruto's wrist, slightly calming him down. I was making a clipper ship out of circus balloons when the silent alarm went off at my home, he said before looking towards the monster. Oh, good gracious, what is that? He asked as Shaggy frowned and walked up. Like, dude, if this isn't Franklin Fruit Mayor, then like, who is it? He asked as Scooby went up and pulled off the mask. Professor Emmanuel Raffalo? They said in confusion as once the mask was pulled away it revealed the professor they had come to for help yesterday. That's right. I was trying to scare people away from the sewers while I dug my way into the bank and got rich, he said as Daphne frowned. But you got a job as a teacher? Why do you need more money? She asked as he just gave her a blank and immensely tired look that quickly made them understand. I discovered that the Crystal Cove caves were connected to the sewer by accident, while collecting mold spores from my class. Once I realized that it led right under the bank, I put my plan into motion. Fruitmares gave me secret access to the sewer, so I decided to frame Balloon Boy for the crime by using his disgusting dessert. I staged my disappearance to throw doubt on any hint of my involvement, Professor Raffalo explained as he frowned. It was foolproof. Genius. That is until you, he said, unsure of the right words before the sheriff cleared his throat. Meddling, he said as Raffalo nodded. Right. Meddling kids and your blasted dog ruined everything, he said before the sheriff took him away. But wait, what about this locket we found where you were digging? Daphne asked, holding up the golden magnifying glass-shaped locket that bore a question mark on it. Never seen it before in my life, the professor said as he was put in the back of the cop car while Naruto swore he saw some recognition on the mayor's face before he let out a sneeze from still being drenched in water. Oh, Mr. Fruit Mayor? Do you think my friend here could borrow a uniform so he can get out of his wet clothes? Velma asked as she put her hands on Naruto's arms to keep him from possibly running from the close proximity to a clown. Of course. You did save my store and myself from possibly being incriminated. Take whatever bits of uniform you need since I wouldn't want your friend to get a cold, Mr. Fruit Mayor said as Velma smiled and led Naruto towards the employee changing room while the sheriff and the mayor scolded the others. You get changed in the bathroom attached, Velma said as she picked up various pieces of the male uniforms, which consisted of light green pants and a darker green button-up shirt. You'll have to wear your wet boxers, but at least your sandals aren't ruined, she said as he smiled, shivering a bit from the cold. Thanks, Velma, he said before turning his head away from her, sneezing into the sleeve of his shirt. No problem. Now go get changed and put your wet clothes in this plastic bag, she said as she picked up a random empty bag that was sticking out of one of the employee lockers. Velma watched and sat down on one of the chairs as Naruto walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. She knew it might be a bit for him to get out of the drenched clothes, but she didn't care. She blushed a bit as she noticed a spare women's uniform on the table next to her, her mind recalling how Naruto said she would have looked great in it, and her curiosity made her wonder how she would look as well and if it would live up to the image in his head. I guess I have a few minutes to change and try it on. Naruto is getting out of wet and heavy clothes, she thought as she stood up and nervously started to change into it, going a bit fast as she would be too embarrassed if Naruto walked back in while she was midway into changing. As she finished changing, thankful that she was able to do it before Naruto had been able to, she blushed a bit as she looked in front of the mirror. The skirt, just like when Shaggy and Scooby tried it on, was quite short as it nearly showed her panties. It also squeezed her chest a bit, making her already large J-cup chest look even bigger than it already was. Her blush grew as she heard a whistle behind her to see a smiling Naruto looking at her from the door to the bathroom. So I was right. You do look amazing in it, he said with a chuckle, for as much as he hated clowns he had to hand it to him for making an amazing uniform. It showed off every bit of Velma, or made it look even better from showing off her long legs, squeezing as well as showing off a bit of her butt, and made her breasts look even better. He wished he could take a photo, but his phone was with his wet clothes in the bag and he doubted Velma would be brave enough to let him take one. You really need to get your eyes checked. This dress is more for someone with Daphne's figure, she said as he started to walk towards her. She felt her cheeks heat up a bit more as he looked her over a few more times before he cupped her cheek with a warm smile. That is nonsense, Velma. You look absolutely beautiful and stunning in this. I doubt Daphne has the curves that you do, he said as he looked into her soft green eyes. Velma's head slightly short-circuited as this was the most direct thing that Naruto has ever really said to her. She honestly didn't know what to do next, so her body did the first thing it thought of. Run. She grabbed her clothes off of the table and ran into the women's restroom with a massive blush on her cheeks before she closed the door and sat down on the tile floor, fanning her face as she would have to think over what he could have actually meant later. Her insecurities winning inside as they made her doubt his words meant what she thought they did. Naruto, back in the employee room, frowned, a bit worried that he might have gone too far. Velma? Are you okay? If I creeped you out, please just forget about it, no, he said before Velma interrupted him with a sudden yell. I mean, it didn't creep me out, Naruto. I was just surprised by the compliment. Did you really mean it? She asked as she wanted to know if he really meant it so her insecurities could stop nibbling at her. Naruto smiled as he turned around, leaning back against the door with a smile as a soft chuckle escaped his lips. I meant every word I said, Velma, he said as he heard her giggle slightly from behind the door. Velma couldn't stop the happy smile from growing on her face as she should have known he meant it. Naruto was always the kind to speak what was on his mind at times. Are you still coming over tonight like planned earlier? He asked as she chuckled. Of course, someone has to make sure you don't catch a cold or anything. Just let me get changed out of this first, she said as he nodded with a smile. Sounds good, but too bad I didn't get to take a picture. You do look really great in that, he said as she blushed more from behind the door. You need to get your eyes checked, she said as he laughed. My eyes are perfectly fine, thank you very much. Plus I doubt I could make glasses look as good as you, he said as she had to muffle a groan into her clothes. What is with you and complimenting me today? She asked, a blush still coloring her cheeks. I don't know, maybe the flying kick I did gave me more adrenaline than I thought, but feel like answering things honestly right now, he said with a chuckle as he looked up at the ceiling. Recently I've also come to the decision I'm not going to hide my feelings, or what I think anymore. I don't want things to pass me by because I bit my tongue too much, or that I didn't go for it, and tell someone how I feel, he said as he got up off the ground. I'll be waiting for you in the main shop so I don't embarrass you by talking while you change, he said as Velma heard the door to the employee area open and close. She frowned a bit as she hugged her clothes to her chest, her mind be-pising what he could have meant, and just how much was he keeping inside of himself. Could he possibly have been doing the same as her, pushing down her feelings? Her frown turned into a smile as the budding hope that had started growing in her from the night before was growing more and more. Of course she'd have to be 100% sure before doing anything, since if she was wrong and she made a fool of herself or ruined their friendship, it would be too painful for her. She sighed as she decided to try and figure all this out later, not wanting to leave Naruto waiting for too long as she started to get changed. Thankfully it didn't take too long to get out of before she walked out of the employee room just as she saw Naruto saying goodbye to the others as they left, only the sheriff sticking around, most likely to lock up for Mr. Fruitmare since the clown was nowhere to be seen. Velma couldn't help but get a bit mad as Shaggy hadn't even waited behind to say goodbye to her or even check to see if she was okay after being attacked by Professor Raffalo. He's supposed to be my boyfriend and he doesn't even seem to remember me most of the time, she frowned before she felt Naruto's still slightly damp arm around her with a smile. You ready to leave? The sheriff has to lock up, so I think we'd better go so he can go home, he said with a chuckle as Velma couldn't keep her frown and smiled with a nod. Sure, let's get back so you can take a warm shower to keep getting a cold, she said as Naruto gave the sheriff a salute while they left the store. Naruto's apartment. Naruto couldn't help but let out a relaxed sigh as they walked into the apartment, thankful it was warmer than the outside. I'm going to get the water running for you so you can take a shower, so hurry up and grab your clothes, she said as he chuckled, long since used to her mother hen-like tendencies whenever it came to making sure he didn't get sick. I got it, don't worry, he said as he walked towards his room, only to frown as he noticed an envelope sitting on the table that wasn't there when he left. Only 2 people had keys to his place besides him, and they were Velma and her mother, and Velma's mom at least respected his privacy to snoop when he was at home, being that he wasn't her kid. The envelope was blank, only a wax seal bearing the number 9 imprinted on it. He frowned as he opened it, careful not to break the wax seal too much, and pulled out the letter. Dear Mr. Uzumaki, I do hope this letter hasn't startled you too much. I much rather would have liked to talk to you in person, but that cannot be done at this time as it would endanger you too much. I am a member of a clan of people in charge of looking after a certain red rope-bound shrine, one I think you are familiar with. The shrine keeps calling out to you and our bindings aren't working nearly as well as they used to. I am sorry that I cannot say much more, but know that a change will happen soon in your life, one I hope you can handle. My clan and I will try to help as much as we can. But whatever you do, do not trust the men in suits that will come bearing the same words as I. They want you for what you are. Stay safe. 9 foot. Naruto widened his eyes as he read over the letter a few more times, a cold sweat breaking out on him before he quickly slipped it back into the envelope and into his pocket just as Velma poked her head back out of the bathroom. Come on, Naruto, the water is ready. Go take you shower, she said as she walked out and towards his living room. Right, sorry. I was kind of spacing out there it seems, he said with a chuckle as he worked to hide his slight worry. If whoever the hell sent this is talking the truth, which I fear he is since he mentioned something I've only told Velma, then what the hell is he meaning by a change in men in suits? He thought with a frown as he decided to look more into it later. Right now he just wanted to relax and spend time with the girl he loved. He'd worry about it all in the morning. Naruto frowned a bit as for once his recurring dream seemed to change. He had been spending the last week since the fruit mayor incident rereading the letter and trying to find anything he could about the shrine. Of course he had done this long before and found nothing, so still finding nothing was at least consistent. The dream had started the same, him in front of the shrine as the eye and smile greeted him, only it continued after that. He saw people wearing monk and shrine maiden style outfits rushing towards the shrine, carrying new red ropes that now had paper streamers attached to them as they tried to wrap the shrine up with them, only for them to instantly burn up to ash. The people were clearly yelling out things by the way their mouths moved, but he couldn't hear what they were saying or even see what their faces looked like as everything of their face besides their nose and mouths were covered in shadow. A deal has been made. I intend to call it in and get my freedom. The voice yelled before his eyes shot open, bringing him back to the real world. He let out a sigh as he noticed it was still dark in his apartment. Great, now these stupid dreams can mess with my sleep, he thought with a frown as he felt someone hold onto him tighter and nuzzle their head against him, making his frown morph into a smile as he saw Velma holding onto him in her sleep. Ever since Fatmir's, things between the two of them have been slowly changing. He guessed it started all with the night after the Fatmir's event. They had stayed up a bit late watching some movies before going to be bedroom to finish studying, as Velma was very intent on making sure he didn't have to repeat any grades. They both had started to drift off while they sat on his bed, Velma eventually getting to her usual sleeping spot, which was laying on his chest, was when things got a bit weird but oddly not entirely awkward. He was really out of it due to all the studying and how late they had stayed up that the second Velma fell against him to use him as pillow, his hands reached out and, well, grabbed her butt. He only remembered a bit of what happened after being that he was half awake, but she didn't move or even slap him. It might have been because she was falling asleep or something, but she never did react, only nuzzle her head against his chest as they both fell asleep. Of course, when he woke up first he took his hands off her, but though it didn't stop him from enjoying the feeling for a little bit before removing them. He didn't know why or how it happened, but the same thing kept happening every morning. He'd always wake up before her, see his hands there, again, and remove them just as she woke up. He didn't know if it was because of the fact Velma had been spending the nights and occasionally time after school with him, or that his body was acting on the impulses he wanted to do but couldn't because she was dating Shaggy, but it kept occurring. And true enough, his hands were on her butt again. As much as I love this, I have really got to stop. What if she wakes up before me one day and sees that, and then calls me a pervert, or something, he thought with a mental groan as he ran his hand through his hair as best as he could without jostling Velma. I need more sleep, stupid dream waking me up, he thought, letting out a soft sigh as he gently wrapped his arms around Velma, who nuzzled against him more, getting comfortable before his eyes weighed down and he fell back to sleep. Velma smiled contentedly as she was woken up by the light peeking through Naruto's window. She looked up and chuckled as even with her terrible eyesight she could see Naruto's face as he slightly drooled in his sleep. She blushed slightly as she felt his hands again on her, but as his hands twitched, slightly groping her. The first time she had felt him grab her, but she almost yelled at him before she quickly noticed he was asleep and doing it in his sleep. And every morning of the week she had been basically staying over the night, for she always woke up before him to feel his hands back on her butt. Plus in his sleep his hands twitched a lot the closer he got to waking up. She wondered if it was happening because of the way they slept, but knew it wasn't, as it was a way they had been sleeping as since they were little kids and shared a bed after her parents took him in. She had quickly become accustomed to using him as a pillow to the point she had difficulties sleeping without laying on something of similar size. Not even a full-sized body pillow helped all that much, hence the reason she stayed over so much besides wanting to spend time with her closest friend. She knew that with her dating Shaggy she shouldn't quite enjoy this as much as she was, but with a boyfriend who cared more about a dog than about her she felt it wasn't that bad. Plus the fact that Naruto was asleep and not wide awake told her it wasn't like he was purposefully doing it. Though every morning, just as he was waking up where she would act asleep, she felt him take his hands off her, but so he at least knew he was doing it in his sleep. A part of her hoped he would maybe touch her when he was awake, but she always had to shake that thought away as it wasn't good to think that way. No matter how little affection she got from her boyfriend who was afraid of what his dog would think. She was brought out of her thoughts as she felt Naruto stir and his hands twitch a bit, meaning he was about to wake up, before she quickly laid her head back down to act asleep. Naruto groaned slightly as he woke up before he quickly stopped as he didn't want to wake up Velma. He let out a quiet sigh as he looked down to see his hands there again on her butt. Okay, this is just getting bothersome. As much as I love having my hands here, she wakes up first, I'd be screwed, he thought as he pulled his hands away and gently pet Velma's head. Velma, wake up. It's morning, he softly said as he watched her eyes open up before she stretched and groaned. Morning already? It's too early, she whined out as he chuckled and rubbed her back. It's the weekend and it's almost 10, so I'd say it's well past early, he said as she rolled her eyes while he handed her glasses over to her. It is early when there is no school and no Fred to drag us out of bed with his plans or something, so I want to relax more, Velma said as he chuckled and wrapped his arms around her while she looked up at him. Naruto tried not to look as, with the way they were lying and with her looking up at him, he could clearly see an ample amount of her cleavage. You're right, and what better way to relax than like this, he said with a smile as he stroked her back, getting her to lay back down as the last thing he needed was to get turned on while she was laying down on top of him. Velma smiled with a faint blush, one that matched the shade on Naruto's cheek after the view he had just had. Whatever, you dork, she teased as she moved her hand up and started to draw small circles on his chest as they relaxed together. Do you have any plans for today? Velma asked after a few minutes into their comfortable silence and relaxation. Besides hanging out with my very adorable best friend, who might I add is cuddled up to me like I'm that teddy bear I got her when she was 10, then no, I don't have anything planned, and that is perfectly okay with me, he said with a smirk as he continued to pet her back. She couldn't help but smile a bit more as she was glad that he wanted to spend time with her, since no one in the group really hung out with her much alone. Daphne was the only one to besides Naruto, and even then it was mostly to talk about Fred or go shopping. Not even her own boyfriend ever seemed to want to ask her to go out on a date, or anything, but he's perfectly okay with going off with Scooby at the drop of a hat for whatever reason. She was brought out of her thoughts as she felt Naruto walk 2 of his fingers up her spine, making her shiver with a slight giggle. So do you have any plans or what to do anything today? I did just get paid from my job at your parents' tourist shop, he said as she looked up at him with a smile. I don't have anything planned either. We could always just hang out here since I don't feel like going out anywhere right now, she said as he smiled and hugged her closer to him. Sounds great, since a little relaxation will do us good, he said before a blush creeped up on both of their cheeks, not that the other could see, as Velma's chest was pressing up against him hard due to how close he was hugging her. She smiled up at him, quickly noticing the blush but not saying anything as her pride as a female went up a bit, knowing that her body could actually affect him like this. She let out a slight giggle as she nodded. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to enjoy the weekend, she said as he smiled back and lessened his hug around her. Velma's smile lasted for the next few hours, as so far her day had consisted of relaxing with her friend on his bed, him making a delicious breakfast for the both of them, and then enjoying some TV on the couch, her using his lap as a pillow, while she read a book. It made her slightly wonder with how nice this all was while Naruto pet her head if this was how most couples acted. It made her wonder how things normally would go if 2 people their age were home alone wearing their pajamas all day. The thought made her cheeks grow dark red as she quickly shook it off, slightly confusing Naruto, who just shrugged it off and kept petting her head. I honestly can't think like that. He's just a really good friend, she thought to herself, but even she wasn't convinced by that too much, as with how close the 2 of them have been getting. The fantasy of Naruto possibly having feelings for her was gradually becoming less and less fantasy in her mind. Her thoughts were interrupted as her phone started to ring on the table before Naruto picked it up and handed it to her. She frowned slightly as she saw it was Fred before she answered. Hello? She asked as she was already expecting him to ask them to come hang out. Hey Velma, I was calling to see if you and the rest of the gang wanted to hang out at my house for a bit. Things have been slow recently with no new mysteries, so it feels lonely, Fred said as Velma rubbed her chin. 1 second, Fred, she said as she covered the receiver with her hand as she looked up at Naruto. It's Fred, he wants to know if we wanted to come over, she told him as he continued to pet her hair while looking down at her. If that's what you want, I'm down for it. Though it is getting kind of late and raining, so it'd probably be a late night thing, Naruto said as Velma didn't mind. She got to spend the majority of the day relaxing, so going out now wasn't that bad. Hey Fred, you still there? Velma asked as she uncovered the receiver and held the phone against her ear. Yeah, I'm still here, so you down to come over? Fred asked as she smiled. Sure, I'll be right over, and I'll go and grab Naruto as well on my way over, she said as no one really in the group knew how she often spent the night over at his house, and she didn't want them to get that much of the wrong impression. Sounds great, see you guys when you get here, Fred said as he hung up before Velma did as well while she looked up at Naruto. Well, I guess we have to change out of our pajamas, he said with a chuckle as she nodded. It was pretty nice while it lasted, Velma said with a smile as she sat up and stretched a bit. I'm going to get changed in your room first, does that sound okay? She asked as he nodded. Go ahead, it's not like we're in a rush, he said as he got up from the couch and popped the kinks out of his back as he couldn't help but stare at her, but as she walked away until she quickly turned back around, mouth open to say something before he had to look away. Velma let the words on her tongue die off as a blush grew on her cheeks as her hands instinctively went to her, but as she realized Naruto had been staring at it while she was leaving, she felt an odd mix of joy and embarrassment from having him stare before she realized was but of an awkward silence. I am actually going to take a shower first so you can get changed first, Velma said before she quickly ran off to his room to get her clothes before he saw her run off into the bathroom. He couldn't help but fall back onto the couch for a second and laugh at the embarrassing moment of being caught staring. Well, at least she didn't get angry or yell at me. I just hope she isn't angry at me or anything, he thought with a sigh, as it was very difficult not to squeeze the thing that had hypnotized him since middle school. Plus, add on to the fact that it was in his hands every morning only made it more difficult, but he was determined to wait until he either found the time to confess or for when and if they ever got together. He let out a sigh as he got back up and went to his room, changing out of his clothes while waiting for Velma to get done with her shower, which didn't take too long before they both left for Fred's house, acting as if nothing happened. A few hours later. Fred's house. We should have stayed at home, Velma groaned as she plopped down on the armchair that Naruto was leaning against. Yeah, there was a better view there for sure, he said with a smirk, as he turned his head and looked at her out of the corner of his eye. Velma blushed as she rolled up the magazine she was reading and bopped him on the head, making him chuckle as he turned his attention to Fred, who was oddly building a trap in front of his door. Fred, who are you honestly expecting to trap out there unless Shaggy ordered another pizza? He asked, as it wouldn't be out of Shaggy's character since he had ordered 3 separate pizzas in the last 2 hours. Before Fred could even answer, the doorbell rang and the trap went off. Oh, I guess we'll see, Fred said as Naruto looked towards Shaggy, who shrugged his shoulders, showing he didn't do it this time. A package for Fred Jones, the delivery man said as he hung upside down from the trap. Hey, that's me, Fred said as he took the package and slammed the door before walking back towards the couch and disabling the trap, letting the delivery man crash back onto the ground with a loud thud. Everyone who was up followed him back towards the couch as he sat down and set down the package on the table. What is it? Scooby asked as Shaggy scratched his chin. I think it's a box, Shaggy said as Naruto buried his face in his hand with a groan. No shit, Sherlock, Scooby was asking what's in it, Naruto said as he and everyone else gave Shaggy a dry look before Fred opened it to reveal something wrapped in cloth with a pink note on top before Velma picked it up. It's from Mr. E, Velma said as while she and Naruto weren't there for the original call, but apparently after Fredmir's, where everyone went to hang out with Angel, the station had got a call from a Mr. E about a curse of Crystal Cove and how with Daphne recovering the locket she had started something that should have stayed buried. Naruto didn't know how he felt about the mysterious man warning them, but if anything he'd be on guard about him. It says save this for a rainy day, enjoy, Velma read as Daphne shivered. Mr. E gives me the creeps, she said as Fred reached into the package. Wait, Fred, it could be a bomb. Oh, strike that. Cute purse, she added as Fred pulled out some kind of lizard skin purse that he handed to Velma. Gang, check it out. 100% pure Gator. Made in Gatorsburg, he read from the tag on the back. Gatorsburg? Scooby asked, confused as Daphne frowned. That's impossible. Gatorsburg hasn't produced Gator products in decades, Daphne said as Velma nodded. Not since the Gator mines ran dry, Velma said as she set down the purse. Gator mines? Scooby asked as Velma nodded. Gatorsburg was a boom town back in the 1800s that was famous for the amount of alligators that it had, more than any in the world. It grew by selling gator skin products, and that was their main resource. It wasn't until the alligator wells dried up did the town die off and is now a ghost town, she said as Shaggy looked at the bag confused. But Freddy, it says it was made in Gatorsburg, he said as Scooby sniffed it. It smells new, Scooby said as Fred smiled. Well, gang, we have a mystery on our hands, Fred said. Everyone but Naruto and Velma cheered and rushed off to the van. We should have stayed home. As much as I like mysteries, I'd rather not go to an empty town that may or may not still have alligators, he said as Velma chuckled. I mean, we could be relaxing on the couch watching that news show you like, Naruto said as he stood up just as the trap went off, capturing everybody. Something he knew was going to happen the second they ran out. I mean, you could have been relaxing at home wearing those cute little pajama shorts you bought recently, the ones with the periodic table on them," he said as she looked at him with a raised eyebrow and a slight blush on her cheeks. "The table is on the butt of those though," she said as he smirked at her and winked. "I know, I've been meaning to memorize it for a while now," he teased as her blush increased and she gave him playful shove. "Oh really? I was thinking about buying a new pair I saw the other day. They were these little ones with clowns on them," she said as he froze and shook his head at her. "Not cool," he said as she laughed and smiled a bit proud of the fact that Naruto sort of admitted to staring at her ass as well as the fact she was able to win their little teasing battle since normally he always was the one that made her nervous. "Whatever, let the others down so we can leave for Gatorburg," she said as he rolled his eyes and took the pocket knife out of his pocket and cut the rope so it wouldn't accidentally trap anyone else. Velma chuckled as she opened the door to see their friends crash down onto the ground. "Well, come on guys, let's get going," she said as they got up and headed for the van again with Naruto and her following behind, though Velma figured he was looking again to make a point, though she oddly didn't care as the gang got into the mystery machine. Naruto frowned as the drive into Gatorburg was the very definition of eerie as the river that ran around the town was glowing green and all the plant life around the town was dead. He was a bit confused as the sign driving in read population 3 after the real number that used to be on the sign was scratched out and the 3 was written in red paint. As they pulled into the town square he noticed the creepy statue in the center before they got out of the van. "This is what happens when a civilization is founded on an entirely Gator-based economy," Velma said as they looked around a bit. "Alright gang, let's split up and look for clues," Fred said as he and Daphne walked off one way leaving the 4 of them left. "What do you say, Shaggy? Want to go clue hunting with me?" Velma asked as she hugged Shaggy's arm while she shook the events with Naruto a bit out of her head since she was still dating Shaggy. "Velma, come on. Like not in front of Scoob," Shaggy said as he pulled her off of him and moved her over, making Naruto clench his fist at how stupid Shaggy was acting, with more being worried for Scooby as usual instead of showing affection to his girlfriend. Naruto rolled his eyes as he stood next to Scooby as the dog sniffed the weird gator statue that had a baby jumping around in the open mouth of one before it chomped down. "I didn't touch it," Scooby said worriedly as Naruto nodded, patting the dog on the back. "Relax, I know," Naruto said with a chuckle as Shaggy walked over. "Hey Scoob, like how about we go check out Gatorburg," Shaggy said as both he and Scooby ran off towards the diner. "Great, so it seems I'm third on the list below Scooby and food," Velma muttered as he draped his arm over her shoulder. "The guy's brain is in his stomach, I swear," he said as she laughed dryly as they followed the two towards the old diner before they watched them jump over the counter towards the still-wrapped burgers. "Like jackpot, Scooby-Doo," Shaggy said as he unwrapped one of the moldy-looking burgers at the meat that looked like a whole baby alligator before shrugging his shoulders and biting into it. He was a bit grossed out as Velma moved his arm off her politely and walked over to Shaggy before tapping him on the shoulder. "We need to talk," she said in a clearly upset tone as Shaggy set down his burger. "Like Velma, I would love to, but like I can't hear anything over the sound of my own stomach," he said as he held up his shirt and put his hands around his stomach. "It's going like maybe give me a triple with cheese and chili and like a pickle," he said as he moved his stomach around like it was talking. "You know what, forget it. Naruto and I are going to look elsewhere," Velma said as she grabbed Naruto's wrist and started pulling him out of the diner. "Velma, wait up." "Velma, what did I do?" Shaggy asked as he followed them out before Velma let go of his wrist. "Nothing. You didn't do anything. Come on, Naruto, let's go," she said a bit loud as she walked off a bit while Shaggy frowned. "So me not doing anything is the thing you are mad about?" Shaggy asked, confused as Naruto rolled his eyes at his friend's denseness. "You really don't know anything about girls, do you?" Naruto asked rhetorically as he followed after Velma, wrapping his arm around her waist before he pulled her close to him to try and calm her down. He didn't care if Shaggy was watching behind as he rubbed her side as they walked, acting a bit more intimately than he normally did as he somewhat wanted to show Shaggy how a boyfriend should act, though he doubted the teen noticed since to others he and Velma were just good friends. "Easy there, Velma. Let's go check out this bookstore." Maybe there's something interesting in there, he said as he held her close, letting her rest her head against him as they walked towards an old broken-looking bookstore. But as they walked in, they found that only the outside was trashed. The inside was, besides a thick layer of dust, was still standing quite nicely. Wow, they have a lot of books here. Who knew Gatorburg had things like this, Velma said as he chuckled. It was a boom town in the 1800s, so it's been around for a while, even if it did crash, he said as he walked down a row of bookshelves as Velma stayed near the front before he tripped on a raised floorboard, only barely catching himself as he fell with a slight crash. Are you okay, Naruto? Velma asked as she looked over after the crash to see him lying on the ground as he pushed himself up. Yeah, I'm fine, just fell on a stupid loose bowl. Hello, what is this? He said as he noticed the board had been completely pulled out by him tripping on it, and there was a hidden compartment underneath. What is in there? Velma asked as she moved over towards him as he pulled a large old-looking book from the hole. It was a very old-looking leather-bound book. The cover read Clan of Nine with the spine merely reading 3 on it with a circle that had a spiral in it at the bottom. He didn't know what exactly about the book felt off, but as he flipped through some pages he widened his eyes slightly as there was a drawing of the same shrine that he had seen in his dreams with the name 9 under it before he slammed the book shut. What? What was in the book? Velma asked as she had only seen Naruto this freaked out when there was a clown nearby. Nothing, I just thought I saw something familiar in it. I think I'm going to take this with me. I mean, it's not like they would care since only 3 people live here, he said as Velma frowned but didn't have time to push it as Fred called out to them to come back. Let's go, gang. There's nothing to trap here, Fred said as they started to walk back to the mystery machine. It seems mystery sent us on a wild goose chase, he said as they got inside, Daphne and Shaggy taking the front with Fred while Velma and Scooby sat in the back. More like a wild gator chase, Shaggy said with a chuckle as Fred tried to start the van only for no noise at all to come out as the engine didn't even seem to try and turn over. That's weird, Fred said with a frown as they got out of the van, Naruto leaving the book there as they went around to the front of the van before Fred opened the hood. Can you tell what the problem is, Fred? Daphne asked as Fred frowned. Well, you see that hole there? Fred asked as he pointed his flashlight at the empty inside of the van. That should be an engine, he added before a loud roar of an engine flared behind them before they turned to see a large tow truck pull up to them. Naruto frowned as a large muscular man stepped out of the tow truck, his instincts forcing him to move Velma behind him as the man stomped over to them. You kids are in some serious trouble, the man said as he walked towards Fred. Care to tell me what you are doing in Gatorburg? He yelled as he picked Fred up by the collar of his shirt. Our van broke down, so put him down, and I don't know, do your job, Naruto growled out as he grabbed the man's wrist and squeezed it tightly. Yeah, maybe you can take a look at it, Fred said as the man glared at Fred. And why should I help you? The man said as Velma rolled her eyes. Because you're a mechanic, she said flatly as the man sighed. Touché, he said as he let go of Fred before walking over to van before he opened the hood. After a few minutes he closed the hood and started wiping his hands of imaginary grease. Here's your problem, your engine's missing, he said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Yes, we know that already, pretty much anyone with eyes can. Can you get us a new one? Naruto asked as the man nodded, not acknowledging the jab at him. I can, but I'd have to order it from Crystal Cove, and seeing how it's more than 3 miles away it won't arrive until morning, he said as Shaggy frowned. You mean we're stuck in this creepy abandoned gator town all night? Shaggy asked as Velma, Fred and Daphne all dialed their parents as Naruto leaned against the van as most of the time his only ride anywhere was the mystery machine or Velma's mom. He frowned as they all hung up with and shook their heads. No luck? He asked as Velma sighed and leaned next to him. You know how it is with Mom when it comes to race night, she said as he draped his arm over her shoulder and held her close, letting her rest her head on his shoulder, while Shaggy dialed his parents before reaching the voicemail. Seems like we are stuck here for the whole night, Naruto said as Velma walked off and smiled at Shaggy, deciding to try and use this as a chance for her to maybe work on her relationship with him. Yeah, it seems like we are, Velma said with a hopeful smile before Scooby butted in between them. And Scooby-Dooby too, Scooby said as Velma frowned and crossed her arms while Shaggy acted like it was great with a smile. Don't suppose you can recommend a hotel? Fred asked as the mechanic started to hook up his tow chain to the mystery machine. My sister Greta runs the best in town, the drowsy Gator, he said, pointing to the building that was glowing red with neon lights as a pink neon sign hung from it. Naruto followed the others as they walked to it, while the mechanic towed the machine over there ahead of them. Great, crappy hotel. I'll say it again, we could have stayed home, he said as Velma elbowed him with a smirk. Come on, it hasn't been that bad, she said as he shrugged his shoulders. Fine, but I still wouldn't take any showers here if you know what I mean, he said as he made a stabbing motion with a noise as Velma rolled her eyes with a chuckle as they met back up with the mechanic in front of the inn. Oh, and a word of advice, don't leave your rooms, the mechanic said before he quickly drove off, leaving them and their van in front of the drowsy Gator. Naruto felt a bit off as they walked into the hotel as eerie piano music flowed through the front desk room. All the Gator decorations did not help set the mood any lighter while Fred rang the bell to call for service before having to ring it a few more times when no one came. We ain't got no rooms, a woman's voice said as they turned around to see an older woman leaning against the archway leading to another room while she twirled a lock of her red hair around her finger. But the sign in your window says vacancy, Fred said as the woman frowned. That sign's broken, she said as she puffed up her hair. It's a painted sign, Velma said in a flat tone as the woman groaned softly before turning towards them full to reveal her eyes were a bit lazy, though no one really mentioned it. Gunther! We got guests! She yelled as a very tall, taller than any of them, and stingy man, his arms almost swinging from side to side, scurried over towards them. His hair covered his right eye as his teeth almost seemed to be all points like, well, a gator. Wheel, yellow, he said in an airy drawn-out tone as he smiled at them. This is my son, Gunther Gator, and I'm Greta Gator, she said as Naruto cleared his throat. So can we have our rooms now? Naruto asked as he definitely didn't like the two rather creepy people as they randomly started to laugh before walking past them. We don't get many guests here at the drowsy Gator, Greta said as she guided them up the stairs. Shocker, Velma said as she stuck close to Naruto since out of the group he was the most able to keep any of them safe. As they walked through the hallway, Naruto frowned as he saw a massive tear in the wall before Shaggy pointed it out like, are those claw marks? He asked as Greta looked at it and frowned. I don't see any marks, she said, dismissing it as if it was nothing before going back to leading them to their rooms. Naruto rose an eyebrow as he reached in the tear and pulled out a large claw before stashing it in his pocket. I got a few hotel rules, Greta said as she opened the door to one of the rooms, letting him, Shaggy, and Fred walk in before stopping Daphne and Velma. Rule number 1, boys and girls in different rooms. No exceptions, she yelled before turning towards Naruto and started to trail her finger down his chest. Though I can make an exception for you, she purred out as his face grew a little green before he moved her hand away and stepped back a bit. No thank you, he said with a shudder as Velma frowned, feeling an odd spike of jealousy and slight anger before looking over at Daphne. Then I guess I'm with you, Daphne, Velma said as Greta narrowed her eyes. I said no exceptions, Greta yelled as Velma frowned. But I'm a girl, Velma said with a bit of annoyance in her tone as Greta frowned. Oh, right, she said as she walked into the room a bit more, allowing Naruto to drape his arm over Velma. Don't let what she said get to you. I don't think she can actually see too well, since anyone with 2 good eyes would be able to see how womanly you are. I mean, I can definitely vouch for it given how you look in your pajamas, he said with a smirk as Velma blushed a bit and playfully elbowed him, making him chuckle. Rule number 2, stay in your rooms no matter what you hear. That includes screams, moans, wails, clawing, scratching, and anything that sounds like a body being dragged along a hardwood floor, she said before she moved closer to Naruto again. Though you can come and visit me later if you want, she said again as this time it was Velma that moved him back. Yeah, no thank you. I like to be with a woman I can see eye to eye with, he said with a not-so-subtle jab at her as her advances were getting nauseating. Well, it seems like Naruto, you, me, Shaggy, and Scoob are in this room, Fred said, trying to change the subject before Greta stopped Scooby from walking in. Almost forget, rule number 3, no pets in the hotel. She yelled as Scooby frowned and Gunther creepily chuckled behind him and Velma, causing him to pull her away from him. It's okay, Scoob, it's only for one night, and you can stay in the mystery machine, Fred said as Shaggy hugged his dog. Yeah, it's only one night, little buddy. I'll see you in the morning, Shaggy said as Scooby hugged tighter as they sobbed against one another. Velma could only roll her eyes as she rested her head against his chest from the annoying scene that once again reminded her how her boyfriend was closer with his dog than with her. Her only real comfort from the fact was Naruto as he rubbed her back before they had to separate to go to their rooms, which were right across the hall from the other. Guess I'll see you in the morning, Naruto said as Velma nodded before Greta and Gunther slammed their doors. You know, Shag, Naruto, when we all graduate from high school and move in together we can get a room just like this. Do you guys like bunk beds? Fred asked as he laid on the bed, Naruto taking the couch as Shaggy paced in the room. I can't think about that, Fred, like I'm really worried about Scoob, Shaggy said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Really? He's in a vehicle, and shouldn't you be worried about the girls since they are kind of separated from us in this creepy hotel? Naruto said as Shaggy waved it off as if he didn't even care. I'd say check on him if not for the fact we were warned to stay in our rooms, Fred said as Shaggy all but bolted from the room as Naruto sighed and decided to go check on the girls, since if Shaggy was checking on his dog then someone should check up on the others. He smirked as he saw Velma walk out of her room as well before bumping into Shaggy. Velma, Shaggy said, a bit surprised as Velma smiled at the two of them before looking at Shaggy. Were you sneaking over to see me? She asked as right now her hope that her boyfriend was actually acting like a boyfriend kind of hid Naruto from her view. Yeah. I wanted to see you but Freddy told I had to go check up on Scooby-Doo, so Shaggy said before Naruto laughed a bit too loud. Really? 'Cause you just were freaking out about Scooby, ignoring my comment on the girls before rushing out, Naruto said as Shaggy widened his eyes and gave him a really look. What? Is that true, Shaggy? Velma asked as Shaggy started to stutter before sighing and nodding. Yes, I'm sorry but I really do have to check on him, Shaggy said as Velma frowned, slight tears welling up in her eyes as she stormed off and Shaggy looked over at him. Dude, like what was that for? Shaggy said as Naruto frowned and shrugged his shoulders. Sorry, I've recently decided to speak more honestly, and I guess it slipped out, Naruto said in a dry tone as he followed after Velma as Shaggy frowned before running off to check on Scooby, completely ignoring Velma again. Naruto knew he shouldn't have done that since it was a bit of a beep move. Though in all honesty he didn't care since Shaggy was willing to lie like that to get Velma's hopes up, and all he really did was call him out on it while she happened to be in front of them. He sighed as he heard a door to one of the many open rooms slam before he opened it up to see Velma frowning as she looked at herself in a 3-part mirror. Shaggy? She asked as she turned around to see Naruto. Sorry, it's not Dog Boy, but I hope I'm able to help, he said as she turned back around at the mirror. Thanks, Naruto, but you don't have to come running every time I get upset. Why do you even come after me so much? I'm not dating you. I'm with Shaggy, so just leave. She yelled before she bit her lip as she didn't mean to sound so harsh to her best friend. She wouldn't even blame him if he walked away angry. Though to her surprise as she looked at him in the mirror he wasn't angry, or even hurt as he walked up to her before turning her around before cupping her cheek. I will always come running to you when you need it, Velma. Whether you want me or not, I'm kind of stubborn like that. Me being here isn't something I do when it fits my time, or my life. Seeing you happy and safe means more to me than anything, he said with a smile as he stroked her cheek with his thumb, wiping off some of the tears that were rolling down. As he looked her in the eyes he chuckled as he smiled. Did you do something with your hair recently? Whatever you did really highlighted your face and forehead more, he said as she smiled from the compliment, glad that someone noticed besides Daphne. At least someone noticed, she said, as it was clear to him that she was holding back tears. Why can't my stupid boyfriend notice? Am I not attractive enough? She asked as she looked up at him. Naruto frowned as he turned her around to face the mirror, his arms wrapped around her waist as he rested his head on top of hers. Velma, that is ridiculous, you are stunning. Your boyfriend is just more into his dog, honestly, he said as Velma frowned. Oh really? How am I stunning? 'Cause if I am, then shouldn't my boyfriend see? I don't have a figure like Daphne, so I honestly don't see it, she said with a frown as he chuckled. He doesn't see what I see. He doesn't see your gorgeous curves. You don't have to be thin to be beautiful. You have a figure that is so full that any woman would kill for, and any guy who isn't obsessed with his dog would drool over, myself included, he said as he very slowly slid his hands from her stomach down to her thighs. I mean, look, your legs are long and your thighs are so luscious and soft, he said in a whisper as he softly stroked them up and down. Your stomach is in no way fat, and still quite lean from when you took martial arts as a kid, he said as his hands trailed up under her sweater, as he rubbed her stomach, making her blush as she could only let out a squeak. Velma's mind was overheating as Naruto's hands were under her shirt as she felt him pull her back a bit, so her butt was now pressing against his lower body. She was too shocked to react as her best friend of countless years was now stroking her thighs and stomach, while she swore she could feel his member erect against her butt. Naruto, what are you doing? Velma asked out in a slightly squeaky voice from the shock of her best friend's hands traveling over her body. I am just showing you how stunning you are, Velma, he said softly, as she felt his lips softly trail kisses up and down her neck while his hands still continued to explore her body a bit. She knew she should be stopping this as she was dating someone and that this was wrong, but she couldn't muster anything as she could only let out a soft moan as he moved his hands back down to her thighs. Also, don't forget your butt. It is so much more plump than Daphne's, to the point my hands get attracted to it in my sleep, he whispered with a chuckle as he slid his hands under her skirt, tracing around the rim of her panties before her eyes widened as she felt his hands start groping her ass. Plus your breasts are much larger than Daphne's, he whispered in her ear as while he didn't move his hands towards them, not wanting to go that far like this as he wanted to save that for if they ever did get together, but he knew they were definitely bigger. She let out another moan, this time slightly louder as she felt his hands, for the first time while awake, squeeze and grope her ass as he moved his head down towards her neck. She felt her cheeks heat up at the comment on her breasts, since she always felt a bit embarrassed about her chest, thinking it was more just fat than anything. Oh, and your moans, it might be the first time hearing them, but they are so sexy, he said as he grazed his lips on her neck, making her moan out his name and him smile massively. It seems I just found another thing I love about you, he whispered in her ear as he gave her earlobe a soft nibble before her eyes widened in shock. She felt her heart beat erratically as she looked at him through the mirror. Naruto, did you seriously just say that? She asked as he moved his eyes up from her neck and looked her in the eyes from behind her and nodded. That's right, Velma. I really do love you. I know I should have chosen a better time, but there never has been one. I've loved you for so long, Velma. I love everything about you, and seeing you unhappy with Shaggy is too much for me to bear, he said with a frown as he buried his face in the back on her neck, trailing soft kisses on it that made her moan again. But Naruto, she tried to stutter out, a bit shaken up by the sudden confession, before Naruto silenced her with a soft kiss on the base of her neck, making her legs quiver a bit. I know you can't answer right now, and I don't want you to. I want you to think it over and answer what is in your heart. Answer who you want more, he said as he nibbled on her ear, making her moan loudly as right now he just wanted to make her happy and give her some of the things that Shaggy had neglected to give her. Her mind was overloaded by everything that was happening, from the affection her best friend was showing her to the confession of love. It had been all too much for her to handle. Velma watched with a dark red blush as she watched Naruto continue to kiss and nibble on her neck and ears as his hands were still groping her ass, all while she could still feel something hard press up against her. She could only pant and moan, as with this being the most she has ever done, it was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. She knew she shouldn't be doing this with Naruto since she was with Shaggy, but a part of her didn't want to tell him to stop. Naruto smiled as Velma moaned and whittled in front of him and grinding her butt against, most likely not intentionally in her haze since he could see it in her eyes. He wanted to continue touching her as having her in his hands was amazing, but he knew he had to wait to go on, as much as that was hard to do. Velma, I love you so much, and while I really wish I could show you just how much by showing your body the attention it deserves, he whispered into her ear as he nibbled on her lobe a bit before he turned her around, still groping her ass as she looked up at him weakly, softly panting and moaning from everything he was doing to her. I want you to please think this over. I am willing to wait for your decision as long as you need, but I have to do one thing since I refuse to let Shaggy have it, and I hope you don't hate me for this, he said as Velma looked at him confused, her daze slightly wearing off before her eyes widened as he cupped her cheek and planted his lips on hers. It was her first kiss, something she had been saving for when Shaggy eventually actually kissed her. A small part of her was angry at him stealing it, but the rest of her melted into the kiss as she felt Naruto hold her close to him and deeply kiss her. She could still even feel his hands slide back down to her butt, stroking and rubbing it as she, in her daze, started to press her lower body against his. Her face was very quickly heating up as she felt his hard member press against her stomach a bit due to their height difference. Her body almost seemed to act a bit on its own as she grinded against him more as he continued their kiss. The feel of his lips and the intensity of the kiss made her legs quiver as she was about to open her mouth to deepen the kiss before the door burst open and they quickly separated while the entire gang burst in. What's going on? Naruto asked as they quickly slammed the door and Fred put his weight against it to keep it closed. Velma fell back onto the bed, sitting down as her legs had given out while she looked up at Naruto in slight shock as she was taking in everything he had just said and done to her. She felt her cheeks heat up as her mind wandered to what could have happened if the rest of the group hadn't have busted in. With how things were going and how her self-restraint was failing, the thoughts were too much for her as her face turned crimson and she shook them out of her head as she knew she shouldn't be imagining such intimate and intense scenarios in her head and needed to get back to the main point of it. He loves me? What? When did this happen? She thought, her head being in a massive haze as she had honestly never noticed his feelings and questioned if she had just been a bit dense. She couldn't help but smile a little bit while butterflies fluttered in her stomach as the crush she thought would always just be unrequited was quickly becoming more realistic. And it somewhat made her nervous. Naruto was her best friend and her crush she has had for a long time, one she had forced herself to give up on as she felt it was unachievable before she chose to date Shaggy. She couldn't just dump Shaggy and move on to Naruto, also she didn't even know if she was brave enough to go for it with Naruto. And comparing the two didn't even seem fair to Shaggy. Naruto was so caring, passionate, and loving with her, more so that Shaggy has been for the combined couple months they had been together for. The way he touched her made almost all of her self-restraint fade away as she had almost opened her mouth to let him deepen their kiss while she grinded on him. It surprised her that she had actually done that, but he was undoubtedly the most handsome guy at school and any girl would do it if given the chance, even herself, the science nerd. Her insecurities still ate her up inside and she was a bit afraid that he would regret being with her if they did get together. If something went wrong and they broke up, she didn't know how she'd handle losing her best and closest friend. Though before her mind could continue running her disaster scenario, she was snapped out of it. Gator people! Daphne yelled as Velma, who had shaken off her daze, quickly adjusted her glasses and her skirt since it had been hiked up a bit before standing up. Come again? Velma asked with a slight voice crack before clearing her throat as Fred held his finger up to his lip. Naruto frowned, a bit tense as they stayed silent in the room as Fred pressed his ear against the door, trying to hear what was going on outside. Maybe they're gone, Fred said a bit unsure before the power burst and all the lights turned off, making Naruto instinctively reach for Velma's wrist to keep her close. Thankfully his instincts were right as he quickly pulled her away from near the window just as one giant gator person burst through the window. Back off, you giant handbag! Naruto yelled as he slammed his foot powerfully into the one gator's face, making him fall out the window, before the gang rushed towards the bathroom to barricade themselves in. Though just he rushed in, he frowned and reached for Fred, pulling him back just as a female-looking gator person tried to swipe her claws at him, and they ran back towards the room just as the first gator came back in. "Make your way towards the door very slowly," Fred whispered as they nodded and quietly made their way towards the door. Just as they were halfway there, the ground in front of Velma burst open and a third gator person burst out, grabbing Velma's legs as Naruto, who was still holding her wrist, held on to her tightly. "Get the hell off her, you ugly bastard, or I swear I will crack your skull," Naruto yelled as he stomped down hard on the gator while pulling Velma out, while Shaggy grabbed her other wrist at the very last second just as the gator let go, making her crash into him and Shaggy letting go. "You saved me," Velma said in a shaky tone. "Of course, the last thing I want is for you to be hurt or in danger," he said as he pulled the skin of the gator's hand off of her, narrowing his eyes as it definitely felt off. Though before he could comment on it, the three gators lunged at them, making them all quickly run out of the room and towards the front door of the hotel. "Scooby, get behind the wheel!" Fred yelled as Naruto understood what he was planning. "But the mystery machine doesn't have an engine," Daphne yelled as Naruto nodded. "Which is why we are going to push it down the hill and away from here," Naruto said as he quickly picked Velma up and stood up on the back bumper to set her on top of the van. "Daphne, get up there as well. Shaggy, help us push," Naruto ordered as Velma helped Daphne up and he, Fred and Shaggy started pushing from behind. "Hold on, girls, because Scooby is going to have to turn it around mid-roll," Naruto said as they held on to the luggage railing on top as they pushed it down, and Scooby rather skillfully turned it around mid-roll before it quickly started to roll down the hill. "Quickly, jump on," Fred said as he helped Shaggy onto the bumper as Naruto ran and caught up with it just as it sped down the hill until it slowed down just as they passed the Welcome to Gatorburg sign. "Look, they're stopping," Velma said as they looked back to see the three gators stopping at the bridge that crossed the river that went through town and acted as the border of it. "They weren't trying to eat us. I think they only wanted us out of town," Naruto said with a frown as he had held on to the hand of the gator that had grabbed Velma. "Is it me, or does this look like a costume? Also, do any of you notice the link between number of gators and number of people living here?" Naruto asked as he pointed to the sign that showed the painted-on 3 above the crossed-out number. "Yeah, but if we are going to solve the rest of this mystery, we need to go back into Gatorburg," Fred said as Naruto frowned but cracked his knuckles. "Fine by me, since I am a bit pissed at them for ruining something," he growled as Velma blushed a bit as she and Daphne got off the top of the van. "Come on, let's follow them while we still can," Fred said as Shaggy and Scooby whimpered as the others stealthily sneaked back through the town until they reached a boathouse and docks. Look, it's them," Shaggy said as they watched the gator people start loading crates into a boat. "What are they loading up?" Daphne asked as Naruto ran crouched down towards a stack of crates as the others followed, and Velma opened on up with a nearby crowbar to reveal it being full of gator skin products. 100% pure gator, she said as she picked up a gator skin belt in a plastic bag and read off the bag with a frown. "It's just like the purse Mr. E sent us," she said as Daphne frowned while Scooby bit open the packagee belt. "Let me see that," Daphne said as she pulled up her sleeve and spun the belt around so it wrapped her whole forearm before letting out a hiss of pain and throwing it off to reveal her arm covered in hives where the belt had touched her skin. "What happened?" Fred asked as Daphne frowned. "I'm allergic to imitation animal skin, pleather, fake fur. It all makes me break out," she said as Naruto grabbed her arm. "You didn't have to do it that much to show us, Daphne. Just be thankful I carry this stuff around," Naruto said as he poured some of Daphne's lotion that alleviated her hives onto his hand and helped her put it on. Due to his and Daphne's friendship, where both of their love interests didn't really notice their advances and were focused on something or someone else, the two of them occasionally had a lot of time to talk and somewhat become better friends. It was around that time that Daphne had told him about her allergies to fake animal skin as well as shellfish. She had asked him to hold on to her EpiPen for the shellfish and lotion for the fake skin, and he agreed to hold on to it. Especially since in a tourist town, and one next to the water, there was a good chance she would run into both. "So that belt isn't 100% pure gator?" It's a fake. They're all fakes, Velma said, slightly trying not to stare as Naruto put on Daphne's lotion as a tinge of something spiked in her chest before she shook it off. She knew how Daphne and Naruto considered each other like siblings, something both have told her various times, but with his intense confession in the hotel her emotions were a bit on haywire. We have to stop them, Fred said with that classic determination in his eyes as Naruto could already tell he was thinking the plans for another trap. Thankfully this time the trap wasn't overly complex like usual, as Shaggy just had to lead the Gator people to the rope snares made out of gator belts that Naruto and Fred were in charge of, since Fred almost made Daphne pull them, already forgetting her allergy to it. He tensed his hands around the belt as Shaggy and Scooby ran by, leading the Gators before they reached the spot. Now! Fred yelled as they both pulled, capturing the Gators as they were sent flying up by the pulley system Fred rigged up. Naruto watched, hoping this one worked unlike the last one, as everything seemed to work fine. The last part was the one that everything could go wrong as the Gators fell onto a trampoline as Velma slid out the Gator skin trunks for them to fall in with the forklift. He let out a sigh of relief as they all fell in and were trapped with the Gator belts wrapping around the trunks as they rolled a bit from the force of the Gator people falling into them. Old 45 gets them every time, Fred said as he and Daphne sat on one of the trunks while he looked through a book that read Fred's traps. Daphne sighed with a pout as Fred, once again, was focusing on his traps before Naruto patted her on the back encouragingly. You'll get him soon, Daph, he said with a smile as he sat down on the middle trunk while Velma called the sheriff, which due to Crystal Cove not being too far away meant he could rather quickly. We should bring these three in front of the hotel so it's easier for the sheriff to find us, he said as Fred nodded and started up the forklift, and carefully scooped them up and drove them off towards the hotel as the others followed on foot. By the time they got to the hotel the cops were already pulling up and waiting. Well, we should get them out, shouldn't we? Naruto asked as he kicked the trunks a few times, making them roll over and rattle around the Gators inside as he was a bit angry. Anyone would be angry too if three Gator people chased their friends into a room where he was confessing to the girl he loved and had just gotten a kiss out of her. Yeah, let's see who these Gators really are, Fred said as he opened the trunks, and just as the Gators lurched out, the Gator belts that had been binding the trunks now bound them and made them unable to move. Fred walked over to the first Gator. As he pulled off his mask, Grady Gator, Grenda Gator and Gunther Gator, Fred said as he walked past, unmasking all of the Gator people. Well, it's kind of obvious since they are the only people living here, Naruto said as Velma shushed him with a smirk as Fred asked them why they had done it. After we ran out of Gators, everybody moved out of Gatorburg, but not us, Grady, the mechanic, said as Greta nodded. This here's our home, she said as Daphne frowned. So with no alligators you decided to make imitation Gator products and pass them off as real, she said as Velma stepped forward next. But you couldn't have anyone snooping around Gatorburg, so you created the creeping creatures to scare people away, she said as Fred nodded. Then you could run your counterfeit Gator ring without anyone know who you were or what you were up to, Fred said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Quite a ridiculous plan as always. Villains honestly need to be smarter if a group of teens can foil it, Naruto said with a chuckle as Gunther leaned forward. And we would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling juveniles and your unauthorized investigation of our synthetic Gator accessories, Gunther said as the sheriff groaned. You're telling me this Gator stuff is fake? I paid a fortune for this track suit. Sheriff Stone yelled as Velma frowned over at the upset sheriff. Sorry, Sheriff, she said as he sighed. Man, I got to get out of this suit. This fake Gator doesn't breathe and I'm starting to smell a little funky, he said as his two deputies backed away from him a bit. Arrest them even though I have absolutely no jurisdiction here, he yelled before storming off to his cruiser as the deputies took away the Gators while he started to drive away. Wait, Sheriff. Can you give us a ride? The mystery machine, as Fred started to say before the supposed engineless van roared to life. Like there's no engine in the mystery machine. It's haunted, Shaggy said as he cowered behind Velma before Naruto rolled his eyes and opened the hood to reveal the engine was back and a familiar pink knot with a wax-pressed E on it was taped onto the inside of the hood. It's from Mystery, Velma said before he pulled and opened it up. Hope you had a good time in Gatorburg. But be warned, there are more mysteries to come. This is only one piece of the puzzle mystery, he read out as Fred frowned. Puzzle? What's that supposed to mean? Fred asked as Shaggy shivered. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling we are going to find out, Shaggy said as lightning flashed and thunder boomed behind them, making Scooby jump into Shaggy's arms and Velma instinctively reach and grab Naruto's hand. Well, come on, gang. Let's get home, Fred said as Velma looked over at Naruto with a blush before she gave his hand a squeeze and sat up in the front with Daphne, leaving him alone in the back with Shaggy and Scooby. The drive back to Crystal Cove was quiet, a bit more than usual, though he chalked it up to them still being a bit out of it from the gators chasing them and the warning Mystery gave them. Once they had reached Crystal Cove, Fred quickly dropped them all off. Naruto made sure to grab the book he had found in Gatorburg as he headed up to his apartment. He wanted to read the book, but for now he just threw it onto his coffee table as he fell back onto his couch. I went too far with that kiss, didn't I? He thought with a frown as he ran his hand through his hair with a loud groan. She barely even looked at me after I did that, and the whole drive home. She definitely is angry at me, he thought as he looked up at the ceiling with a sigh. He was brought out of his thoughts as a knock rang out on his door, making him quickly stand up and walk to it a bit confused. He wasn't expecting anyone over, and it's not like he got many visitors in general. As he opened the door, he was a bit stunned to see Velma standing there, as she looked at him with a blush on her cheeks. My mom said I can stay over like usual. Can I still come in? She asked as he nodded, a bit surprised to see her here. Yeah, of course, you're still welcomed here whenever, he said as she smiled lightly and nodded as she walked inside. Do you want some tea or coffee? He asked as she shook her head and sat down on the couch and looked at him as if telling him to sit down as well, which he quickly did. The two of them stayed in a bit of silence before Velma clenched her fists and frowned. I don't know what or who I want right now, Naruto, and right now with everything that happened in that hotel room I am very confused. I don't want our friendship to be broken because of my indecisiveness, she said as Naruto could see her eyes watering up before he put his hands over her clenched fists and squeezed them softly. Velma, you don't have to feel stressed or rushed to answer. I meant it when I said I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to figure things out. The main thing I want is for you to be happy. That's partially why I did what I did, he said softly as she looked up at him. It was eating me up inside every time you got upset or sad when Shaggy blew you off, since you deserve to be loved. I promise I won't go away if you pick Shaggy over me, since I don't think I could function without you in my life, he said with a chuckle, making her laugh softly as well. And the kiss? She asked as he smiled and stroked her cheek. I promise I won't pull any dirty moves like that again, and will leave your lips alone until or if you choose me. The last thing I want is for you to feel uncomfortable, or like you are forced to decide before you are ready, he said as she nodded before letting out a squeak as he pulled her onto his lap. Though that doesn't mean I'm not going to tease you, he said as he wrapped his arms around her lap and fall back, pulling her down with him. Velma blushed a bit as she rested her head on his chest before she put her hands on him and pushed up so she could look at him. Before she could question if he was actually serious or not, she squeaked as she felt his hands slide under her skirt and start to grope and squeeze her ass, as she could see by the look in his eyes he was very clearly serious about teasing her from time to time. She felt a bit conflicted as Naruto rubbed and groped her ass. She knew she shouldn't be allowing or liking this as much as she was, but some deep part of her told her to let it play out and see what all Naruto means by teasing. Fine, but no funny business, she said as she jabbed her finger against his chest as he nodded, still rubbing her ass as she looked down at him. I promise, but it will be quite hard given how I can see myself getting addicted to this, he said with a smirk as he started to squeeze and grope her ass even more. He was definitely enjoying himself as he groped her ass over her panties, digging his fingers into her very supple ass and stroked it. Velma bit her lip before she let out a soft moan, and she slapped his chest out of embarrassment before he held his hands up in surrender. Sorry, I couldn't help. No real funny business starting now, he said as she pouted at him but nodded. Well, anyways, it is getting late. Are you still going to stay over? He asked as she nodded. Yeah. I don't want things to change between us, Naruto, and to be honest, I like spending the night here. It gets me away from my mom and everything, Velma said as he smiled and pet her head. Well then, let's get off to bed then, he said with a smile as Velma smiled. I'll get changed. Meet you in the room? She asked as he nodded and smiled as she walked off, staring at her but as she walked away. Though the second the bathroom door closed, he couldn't help but smile as he was immensely happy that she actually wasn't angry at him and actually thinking things over. He actually wanted her to take her time to answer him, since Velma was the type who made decisions better after thinking them over a bit, and he didn't want to make her rush into anything. His eyes looked back to the book that he had set on the coffee table before he picked it up and frowned as he opened the drawer on his entertainment system and slid it in there to keep it safe and out of view. Right now, reading through all of that book could come later. Right now, he was just happy to still be able to spend time with Velma, and he wanted to use all the time he could with her. The book would always be there for him to read tomorrow. You coming to bed? Velma said behind him as he turned to see her standing in front of his bedroom door in her usual pajamas. He smiled as he nodded. Yeah. Sorry, I was just putting something away, he said with a smile as he draped his arm over her shoulder and walked to his room, glad he still had her in his life and hopeful that things grew between them in the future. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comment section how was the story. And also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.